AI voice callers are a rapidly growing technology that can handle inbound and outbound calling fully autonomously for your business. This system uses artificial intelligence to generate a response to a caller's question, and then uses AI to generate a realistic sounding voice that then repeats the response back to the caller. I know it sounds crazy, but I encourage you to watch this video to get a true understanding on how this works. Rather than waiting months for sales teams to call lead lists, AI callers can do this in minutes. Rather than making leads wait for our calls, we can call and qualify them with this in minutes. If you own a business that is making calls every single day, then this is something you need to pay attention to. Here is a quick demo of how it sounds.
Hey, welcome to Inflate. What can I help you with?
My name's Brendan. I'd like to book a call on Monday for 2 p.m.
Hold on a sec. Your call on Monday at 2 p.m. has been booked.
Businesses today are spending thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars on telemarketing. Telemarketing is simply the direct marketing of goods or services to potential customers over the phone. Not only is it expensive to hire teams of people to make these calls, it also takes a lot of time to dial all these numbers one by one. Now imagine if we could fully automate these calls with realistic sounding, quick to respond AI voice callers that are indistinguishable from real people. My name is Brendan and I run Inflate AI, where my team and I help businesses integrate the latest AI solutions. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and dived into the AI space with the release of ChatGPT, identifying the significant impact that it would have on businesses. This video is backed up not only by me, but by partners at Inflate AI and our clients who have experienced genuine results from these systems that I will go through in this video. I'm going to go in depth into the world of AI voice callers and break down everything you need to know, taking you from a complete beginner with no experience to being an expert in AI voice callers. If you feel pressured because you don't understand how these systems work and are not sure how it could help your business, this video is for you to get a real understanding of how this is being used today to get you up to speed with everybody else. I'm first going to cover the opportunity at large. There are many different use cases and industries for AI callers that I've had come through my own agency. So hopefully these use cases and clear advantages provided for businesses will help you think about how this could be used in your own business. I'm then going to cover key concepts. These key concepts will quickly get you up to speed with all of the jargon, software, AI basics, essentially everything you need to know to start building your first caller. I'll then go in depth into the two main platforms that we use within my agency to develop these systems, Vapi and Make.com. I'll go through exactly what these platforms are during the key concepts. I'll then move on to prompt engineering, which is one of the most critical processes in building and instructing these systems to work as best as possible. You'll once again learn exactly what prompting and prompt engineering is in the key concepts. I'll then go through a practical task building out an outbound cold calling system. This will take a list of leads and start calling them and collecting data back, such as if the lead was interested in purchasing our services or not. I'll also go through how to build an inbound lead qualification caller step by step. You'll also have completely free access to everything in this video, including all the templates and prompts within my free resource hub linked in the description. This also includes 20 other chatbot and automation related templates as well. This may seem like a lot to take in, but I've designed this tutorial to be super easy to follow along with, especially for beginners. So I'm going to start off by going over the opportunity. So to get started, I'm just going to take a little bit of a step back and go through a bit about what the use case here is for these systems. So very simply, businesses send and receive phone calls every single day. And most commonly, these are sales calls. So a sales call is a conversation between a salesperson and a prospect about the purchase of a product or service. Now, the purpose of this call is to understand if that person is actually interested in the product or service the business offers, and to then qualify them for the next steps in their sales process. So this could be booking them into an appointment or just having someone else call them at another time. This is really just any step that will help the lead make a more informed purchase. So what does this involve? Well, option one could be an in-house salesperson. So an in-house salesperson is someone that's being paid a salary. I just quickly Googled and the average base salary for a salesperson is around 55,000 USD, and that's not including performance fees. So performance fees are sort of an incentive to continue to sell. So if they make a sale, they get a percentage of that sale, and that's their performance fee. So the salesperson would actually require training as well on the business and the exact products and services, so they can actually handle any customer objections and actually provide value to the customers. So this is just going to cost more time and money. This team will also then need access to some sort of CRM, so customer relationship management software, to actually track which leads were interested and which were not. And then this is just going to consume more of the sales team's time, which is taking time away from calling and therefore reducing efficiency. Now, alternatively, businesses may decide to hire an external sales team, also known as outsourcing. So this could be sort of a company that provides sales services that essentially just lends you their existing team, or you go ahead and just hire some sort of freelance salesperson who operates remotely. Now, currently hiring some sort of outsourced sales team from the US can be pretty expensive, 5 to 6 figures per month, plus performance fees depending on obviously the supplier of that team. Whereas hiring a team from countries like the Philippines, where labor is actually cheaper, it's quite common for outsourcing callers and sales teams. Now, this can be significantly cheaper at around 4 figures per month, and depending on the agreement, you may not have to pay performance fees, or at least it'll be significantly less than the performance fees of the US team. Now, these sales teams will typically do 2 types of calls, and they are the inbound calls and outbound calls. So inbound is when a lead submits a form on a website with their phone number. They'll then receive a call from a salesperson, and this is an inbound lead call. So they're inbound because they've contacted into the business, and then they're getting a call a few minutes later, or maybe a few hours later, depending on what their structure is. And so this is done to sort of handle any objections. So especially for higher ticket items, being able to offer insights into the products and services will increase the chances of actually selling rather than losing them when they see the prices on the website. And this is a very common sales strategy. So typically, if you go on a website and they don't have the prices directly on that product specifically, and it just says to contact them or call them, this is exactly why they want to handle any objections and make sure they can actually close that sale, because it's worth it to them to make that call. Now, for outbound, when the business finds a sort of lead list online or just has a lead list, and then it goes ahead and calls them and really just markets their products and services, this is cold outbound calling. So the lead knows nothing about their services, and this is just a very common way for businesses to obtain new clients. And ideally, the business has a good data set of leads that are sort of relatively qualified, so they are actually interested in those services and will call them. So let's just quickly compare those different methods. So we've got the in-house sales team. Some of the benefits are that they are motivated to sell because they're in the business. There's that good sort of corporate culture. Because they're within the business, they're alongside other people and they're motivated to work with them. There's likely going to be a higher direct performance earning. So the more sales they make, the more money they make, and therefore there's motivation there. They're easier to monitor. If they're in-house, it's very easy to monitor if they're sitting right next to you or they're just in the office. They're also going to be properly trained within the business. So obviously if they're working alongside other people in the same business, and they've been directly trained by the managers or something similar, they're obviously going to have much more experience than something like an external team. There's also going to be a much better experience for the leads because of their language, their accent, their knowledge. So obviously they're not, coming from overseas. If they're in-house, they're from the US, they've got the language, they can speak fluently. If you're calling with your native accent, it's a bit more relatable to the caller. They've obviously got more knowledge on the products and services because they've been properly trained. And then the leads are going to have a better experience because they can get more help and they can get a better understanding of what they're buying. So the downside of the in-house sales team is that it is expensive. So the wages involved, like I said, with that sort of average 55,000 base salary, not including performance fees, it's very expensive to get someone in-house working full-time to do those sales. It's going to be time consuming to actually onboard them into the business. So they're going to have to train them on everything, the services and whatnot, and get them up to speed. It's going to be time consuming to actually run the sort of campaigns. So it's going to take weeks to months to them to obviously call people, especially if there's only one of them. That's going to be a very big cost because you're going to need more expensive staff if you actually want to scale that system. There's also the chance for human error. So if they miss a lead that comes through or calls them back, especially if you're getting hundreds to thousands of leads per day, there's just going to be lost opportunity there. Some of the benefits of the outsourced sales team is that it's cheap. If it's overseas, you're accessing that cheaper labor. It's going to be a better decision to make, and it's going to be relatively easy to onboard. So these teams that you hire that are outsourced, they're probably going to have processes in place to set up as quickly as possible. So for you, it's probably going to be quite easy. But obviously, in contrast to that, they're going to be quite hard to monitor. If they're overseas and they're not exactly the most fluent in English, it's going to be quite hard to communicate with and ensure that you're getting exactly what you need across. They're not really going to be motivated to sell because you have no control over that incentive. It's possible that they're giving them an incentive. It's likely not going to be as much as your US-based sales team. They're likely to be poorly trained, obviously because it's hard to monitor. It's really hard to tell if these people have been given all of the required documents and sort of knowledge and have actually put in the time to learn about the business. So it's going to be pretty hard to actually know if they're going to be well trained. It's also probably going to be a much worse experience for the leads, especially if they don't have that sort of native accent to the country they're meant to be calling from. The language, they're not going to be fluent in English or whatever language you want them to be speaking from. And obviously the knowledge, if they're poorly trained, if they're not as motivated to actually understand everything, their knowledge is not going to be that great and they might not be able to answer all of your leads' questions. Now comparing this to AI phone callers are cheap. So they're probably similar in price to the outsourced overseas team, definitely much cheaper than the in-house US team. It's easy to monitor this system because you've got access to all of the data. At all times, you'll have access to everything that's going on with all of the calls that are being made, the transcripts, the call recordings, everything you can get access to. These phone callers are going to be motivated to sell. They're not going to change from when we set them up. So we can just set them up to be motivated and they're going to stay like that. They're going to be highly trained as well. So we're going to give it all the knowledge about the business and it can pull any bit of information that it needs. And it's probably going to be more informed than you on the business. I've noted that it's going to be a decent experience for leads. So I'm not saying it's going to be the best experience ever. I'm also not saying that it's going to be a bad experience. I'm just saying that the experience compared to something like the international outsourced team that probably has a different accent, it's definitely going to be better than that. But I can't guarantee that it's going to be as good as an in-house US team salesperson just because of the nature of the fact that it is still AI. Whilst it does sound super realistic, obviously sometimes the responses do sound a bit robotic and that's because it is a robot. So that's just the case. But for the most part, we should still meet our sort of call objectives, whether that's qualifying them for our services or booking appointments. We should be able to meet that sort of call objective through this caller. We can also have data immediately sent into the CRM system. So we can just have all of the call information and call outcomes directly sent into the CRM system without any need to manually type in anything. This system is also very quick. So we can actually send thousands of calls within minutes. Now, we probably wouldn't send thousands of calls in minutes. We do this in more of a sort of batch approach. So we actually analyze the results from the first set of leads, then we actually measure the results and make the appropriate adjustments. And then once we've actually ran an extensive testing period and we're actually confident in how it performs, then we'll move into sort of a more bulk process. I will cover testing and data analysis later in the video. So I've gone ahead and created a table with the 3 different methods here just to really visualize the benefits of each. So we can see here, obviously the AI callers are coming in and pretty much crushing in all of the areas except for the lead experience, where I've said it's decent. It's definitely not as bad as the outsourced team, but it's probably not as good as the in-house team. But then obviously we need to weigh up all of the other elements. One being cost, obviously it's cheap. In-house is very expensive and the time is quick to do the AI callers. It's very slow to do the in-house team. So when we weigh up all these factors, the lead experience ultimately at being decent is something that is probably justifiable. So hopefully that sounds good. I'm now going to go through how industries are actually using this. So one very specific use case is real estate. So we've had quite a few real estate agents come through our agency and on through this channel. And so real estate agents have sort of a list of leads that could be homeowners, and they will usually call them to see if there's actually a potential that they may want to actually sell their property. And so if so, they'll actually follow up with them with further information and then hopefully make a commission on actually selling their home. Now, the solution to this could be an outbound caller that would then call all of these leads automatically, just ask a few qualifying questions, capture that data, and then send that into a CRM system, and then that'll be done within minutes. Another industry is e-commerce. So around 70% of online customers actually abandon their carts, and this just means they've added a product to their cart, they've then left the website and they haven't purchased. Now, currently, stores will actually send text messages and emails to get them to purchase again. And if this is not successful, we can then implement an AI caller to follow up with them and provide a 24-hour discount code or just some other benefit. And this will just help to reduce the 70% of lost sales. So this could be simply a call that just says, hey, we saw you were interested in this product. Here's a 24-hour discount code. Another industry is car dealerships. So they receive thousands of calls per month and an inbound phone number that provides car recommendations and information based off of the car inventory would help to close more sales and just save a lot of time and money compared to the existing team. Home services, so pool maintenance, pressure washing, lawn mowing, etc. All of these service-based businesses get hundreds of calls per day and are spending large amounts of money to actually capture these leads and convert them into sales. So by implementing a properly built AI voice system, we can then immediately reduce the current cost of taking those calls. We will then start to see an immediate impact on the time it actually takes to respond to these leads. And this will just mean more leads converting and sales increasing very quickly. So hopefully you can now recognize the significant advantage that AI phone callers have over existing sales processes. I'm now going to go through some of the key fundamental concepts. So 4 key concepts that I'm going to go through are large language models, prompting, functions, and software. So don't get overwhelmed by this. It's really quite simple. And I'm going to go through each of these step by step. So a large language model is a computational model notable for its ability to achieve general purpose language generation. So very simply, the large language model is just a smart brain that has been trained on lots of data and is able to generate answers to questions. Now, there are many different LLMs created by different companies. So the creator of ChatGPT is OpenAI, and they created the GPT models, for example, GPT 3.5 or GPT 4. So Meta or Facebook created a model called Llama, and Google created a model called Gemini. So there are many large language models out there, but for the purpose of this video, I'll be using the GPT models. So these are just the most popular and capable models for this purpose as of today. Prompting. So an AI prompt is any form of text, question, information, or coding that communicates to AI what response you're looking for. So this is how we actually communicate to the large language model. So this LLM being the brain of our voice assistant. So our voice assistant will actually act according to our prompt. Prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is the process of actually structuring an instruction that can then be interpreted and understood by a generative AI model. So there is a structure and process that must be followed to ensure you're effectively communicating with the AI. So for instance, we've got sort of good prompts and bad prompts. Now, good prompts are sort of clear prompts. They're concise. They give relevant context. They're driven by purpose. So it's well structured. It's very clear exactly what we're looking for. And then we've got the bad prompts. And these bad prompts are ambiguous. They lack crucial details. They use unclear language, and they're probably going to be misleading. Now, I will dive deeper into prompt engineering specifically for AI phone callers later in the video, but this is what will make or break your voice assistant. So this is what we're actually going to be testing and improving so heavily during our analysis for our clients. Now, for function calls, when answering any sort of questions, the model can choose to delegate certain data processing tasks. Very simply, we can actually set up functions that essentially trigger automations in the background of our calls. So for example, if we wanted to save a lead's name and address into our CRM system, we could create a function that then just looks for their name and address during the call. Once it's found those values, it just sends them into our CRM using an API call, which I'll just cover in a second. The way this function works is that it's actually prompted to understand what it's looking for. For example, we could say, please run this function when you have captured the name and address. Now, I will cover this further during the live build where I set up multiple functions for different purposes. API request. So API request stands for Application Program Interface, and an API call or API request is just a message that's sent to a server asking an API to provide a service or information. So for example, the Weather Bureau's software system contains daily weather data. The weather app on your phone would then talk to this system via an API, and that's how it shows you that daily weather update on your phone. So when we want to send our data from the voice caller to our CRM system, we will then use an API request to send this data. Fundamentally, there are two main API request types, a post request and a get request. Simply put, a post request posts data off to another application to be used, and a get request asks to receive certain data back from an application. Now, I will set up both of these API requests with the functions during my live builds. Onto software. So Vapi.ai, this is the platform that we use to build AI phone callers. So it enables us to actually change the LLM models, prompt the assistants, and then change the voice sound, etc. Now, I will extensively cover this platform later in the video. And ultimately, this is the key software that we're going to be using for the creation of this system. So Make.com, this is an automations platform that we will use with our functions. If you are familiar with Zapier, this platform is pretty similar. So we're able to make an API request to Make with some data from the phone call, and then have it easily sent into any CRM system or database of our choice. So you can kind of think of it as a central hub for connecting thousands of different applications to easily talk to each other. 11 Labs. So this is a platform that we will use to get realistic sounding voices. Vapi enables us to actually connect different voice platforms. 11 Labs is one of them. So 11 Labs is also known for being one of the best in realistic sounding voices. It also has quite a large public voice library, as well as the ability to actually clone your own voice. So hopefully you now understand the significant benefit these systems can actually provide for businesses. And you should also have an understanding of the fundamental pieces that these systems are built on. All right, so jumping straight into it, I'm gonna go through Vapi and I'm gonna go through Make.com. As like I said, these are gonna be the two main platforms that we use within our agency and that we pretty much recommend to use to build these systems. So this is the Vapi platform. Vapi, like I said, is used to build our voice systems. So Vapi, like I said, is used to build our main voice systems. So this is going to allow us to prompt, to provide prompts and then to instruct our assistants to connect our voice platforms. Essentially everything is going to be connected to this system, and then everything can be also managed within this as well. So this page that you'll land on once signing up for an account, it is completely free to sign up for an account. You just have to pay for the cost per minute. So when we run these systems, there is a cost per minute. If you haven't yet signed up for Vapi, I'd greatly appreciate it if you'd go ahead and sign up using my affiliate link in the description. So the page that we're on right now is sort of our assistants menu. So we've got a whole host of assistants here. It is blocked out just because I have a few client builds on here, but this is essentially just going to be a list of the assistants that we've created on Vapi. Now each assistant is a different caller. So each assistant is given one prompt, and that prompt forms who that caller is, how it talks, what it talks about, how it responds. All of that is contained within a single assistant. So before I dive into all of these sort of features contained within the assistance functions, I'll just go down to phone numbers. So in Vapi, we're able to import from Twilio or Vonage. I'm using Twilio specifically for this. So I'll show you how to generate a Twilio number. So on Twilio, it's actually really easy to create a phone number. Just sign up for a Twilio account and you will actually automatically get given a US phone number to use. So if you just want to use the US phone number for now for testing, you can go ahead, sign up for an account. You're going to land on a sort of main menu page like this. And then you're going to see at the bottom left, your account SID, authentication token. It's also going to give you the phone number that's registered to your account. Going back to Vapi, we can just hit import, and then it's just going to ask us for that information. Just give it your Twilio phone number that it provided you with, Twilio account SID, Twilio authentication token, and then we can just give it a label. So this is just anything. We're just naming what it's called, and we can just fill in those bits of data, click import, and then from that, you're going to be able to import your Twilio number. Now, if you're not located within the US or you want to buy a separate number or a different number, you can also go ahead and buy numbers through Twilio, or you can buy a number through Vapi itself. Now, unfortunately, Vapi only provides US and Canada phone numbers at the moment. But obviously, if you're in the US and Canada, this is a pretty easy choice to make. Just use this and you can just pay $2 and you'll be able to get your phone number directly from Vapi without having to deal with Twilio. Once you've gone ahead and imported your phone number, there's going to be two options here called inbound and outbound. Now, inbound and outbound is just simply how we want to send our calls. So we can set up this phone number to be the inbound assistant for a particular assistant. So I can click through my list of assistants and just choose any of the ones that we created previously on the page I was just looking at, and we can assign that to a phone number. So if I wanted to assign this phone number to a particular assistant, anytime anybody calls that phone number, that assistant is going to pick up from that call. Now for the outbound section here, what we can do is essentially just set a phone number that we want to send a call to. We can select the assistant that we want to be sending off, and that's all going to be with under the phone number that we're on. So this phone numbers tab is everything to do with sending and receiving calls and dealing with all that number information. Just below phone numbers is a documents tab. So this documents tab is for uploading any knowledge-based documents. Now I will come back to this in just a minute because this is related more to the assistants than more of a main function, but ultimately we upload documents to be able to assign them to assistants. And this gives our assistants more knowledge. So we can upload a PDF file of information on the business. We can assign that to an assistant that is meant to help people understand the business. And then obviously without adding everything into the assistant. So this tab is to centrally store all of our documents. Maybe we want to use one document on multiple assistants. And so if we have a documents folder here, we can essentially assign any document to any assistant by uploading them right here. Now below this, we have the voice library, and the voice library is a huge list of all of the voices that are assigned to a particular voice provider. So in this case, I've got 11 labs selected as a voice provider, and it's gone ahead and listed all of the 11 labs voices that I've got on my account, or some of these sort of main 11 labs voices that are provided. So it says here, total 56 voices. So there's a lot of flexibility around the different types of voices that we may want to choose. Now I'm from Australia, so I wouldn't necessarily want a US accent for my Australian clients. So I can go ahead and I just select Australian for the accent. And now I've got a list of Australians that I can use to make a bit more of a realistic sounding system for the Australian clients. Now, additionally, like I mentioned previously, 11 Labs allows us to clone our own voices. And so if we connect our 11 Labs account, we can now get access to our own voice clones. So this right here is my voice clone within Vapi that I can simply assign to any assistant I'd like, and I can start to speak just like me. So I can just quickly test how that actually sounds so you can see if it sounds any good. I allow my intuition to lead my path. So this is a pretty cool feature if we want to clone any of our clients' voices to make it that little bit extra realistic, or you want to trick your friends, clone your voice, you can just send them a call with your voice. Now, in order to actually connect your 11 Labs to Vapi, we do just have to come down to provider APIs down here. And this is where it provides us with all of the different platforms that can connect to Vapi. So there are a lot of platforms that we can connect to Vapi. And this is one of the things that I really like about Vapi is that it is completely open. There's no restrictions as to what you can use and what you can't. They've added in a heap of options that we can come through and add in our API keys for, and it will just connect directly to that and we can start using it from Vapi. So in this instance, I've gone ahead and connected 11 Labs. So all I've done is gone to 11 Labs. They've even got a button here to take you there. Go to your 11 Labs, find the API key through the settings, or for whatever platform you want to use, they should have a pretty easy way to get an API key. You just copy that key, paste it in here, and then it's automatically connected And then if I go back to my voice library, it's going to auto-populate all of the 11 labbed voices from my library into Vapi. I've also done the same for OpenAI. So when we're actually generating the responses for our voice assistants, I've gone ahead and uploaded my own API key to pay for that through OpenAI. However, if you prefer, you can go ahead and actually not upload any keys yourself, and you can just have it build directly through Vapi. Through that cost per minute, it'll just build through Vapi. So going back up to call logs, this is where all of the calls are actually stored and saved. So every call we make, whether that's inbound or outbound, all gets stored within this one page. And this is really convenient because now we can get access to the entire call recording, call summaries, call logs, call transcripts, a lot of data on what's going on through these calls. So if we want to start sending out a whole host of calls, everything is tracked through here. Jumping down to organization, this is some sort of backend details. You won't necessarily need this, but what we have here are API keys. And so I'll actually use this later in the video when I'm building out some of the assistants. But these API keys allow us to talk to Vapi via APIs. So we can actually essentially send calls in an automated fashion. So when I build the cold calling machine, what we're able to do is send a request to the Vapi API. And then what we're doing is triggering a call for every new lead in our lead list. And so that's one of the cold calling systems that we're going to need these keys for. So I'll show you how to use this later in the video, but this is where you'll find it. Jumping down to billing, this is all of these sort of cost per minute costs. So every time we make a call, it does cost money to actually run that call, especially if it goes for a long time, as there is a cost per minute associated with every call. So what it will do is it will track essentially all of the calls that occur. It's going to rack up those costs, and then you would essentially just be billed directly to the payment method that you added to Vapi. And you can set up a monthly usage limit. So if you want to strictly limit your system to not hit over a budget, if you set that monthly usage limit and then it reaches that limit, essentially the voice assistants will just stop calling, they just won't work, and you won't be billed from there. So that is pretty much it for the left-hand side of the Vapi menu options. If we go up to the top right here, we have an Ask AI for help. And this is a really cool function that allows us to sort of ask like a chatbot, anything about Vapi. So if we wanted a question about how much does it cost, we can actually send this off to a pretty cool AI that's going to go through a bunch of different sort of just FAQ stuff. So if you're ever confused about something, you need help with something, we can just talk directly to this, and then we're going to be able to get some support through their documents, or we can actually just ask their AI chatbot directly. So I've just asked the Vapi AI, how much does it actually cost? And you can see here, the cost depends on several different factors: calls, duration, providers, etc. So that's pretty accurate. Vapi itself charges a flat rate of 5 cents. So that's a good thing to note. And so instead of Vapi obviously charging us a monthly subscription or something like that, all they do is charge 5 cents per minute for calls. And so with all of the providers as well, if you go back to our provider APIs, when we upload this, it doesn't upsell or upcharge on any of this. So we upload our API keys, it directly charges to those accounts at the sort of wholesale cost, if you will. We're paying the direct cost to those platforms. And that's another really good benefit of Vapi, is that it's significantly cheaper because of that. All right, so now I'm going to jump into the actual specifics of the assistant settings on Vapi. So this initial page here, just this bit here, is all of the assistant settings required to build our assistant. One good thing about Vapi is we can actually test it within the browser. So if we hit talk with, in this case, John's Pizza, this is a very example system that I built. We can just talk with it over the web. It will just turn on our mic. We can talk back and forth with it and test if it works through this. But the main area of this that you're going to be using is this bottom section here, which contains the model, transcriber, voice, functions, and advanced settings. So now I'm going to go through all of the model settings, and this is everything to do with prompting and our large language model. So to get started, we've got a first message. Now the first message is pretty much exactly what it says. It's the first thing that it says when you call the assistant. So in this case, I've said, hey, welcome to John's Pizza. What can I get you today? So if we were calling up a pizza place, this would be the first message that it reads out, and we can set that to be sort of a static value. This won't change. It'll just read this word for word. Then below this, we've got the system prompt, and the system prompt is our main prompt, the set of instructions that we're going to give to the AI to read through and then build its sort of personality from. Now I will go through prompting and everything you need to know about prompting later in the video, but just so you know, this is exactly where the prompt is going to go. And all it is you naturally typing into this box here to talk to it, to tell it how it works or how it should respond to certain questions. That's all typed naturally in here. And the AI is able to read this, it is able to follow that, and then craft its sort of personality and structure from. So off to the right here, we've got our large language model settings. Firstly, we have the provider. So in this case, I'm using OpenAI. So OpenAI was the creator of ChatGPT. It's one of the biggest models out there. It's one of the most used models out there, and it's one of the best performing models. So I'm using OpenAI. There is a whole host of other models that you can choose as well. But for this instance, just going to be choosing OpenAI for now. Just below this, we've got our model. Now the model, I've chosen GPT 3.5 Turbo, but for the OpenAI, we've got two sort of different model choices, one being GPT 3.5, one being GPT-4. Now there are two different use cases for these two different models. GPT 3.5 is a much quicker, much faster responding system. However, its responses aren't as sophisticated as something like GPT-4. GPT-4 is quite a bit slower in responding. GPT-4 is much slower in responding, but it thinks through its answers a bit more and can respond more accurately and follow the prompt a bit better. So if we have a sales script, GPT-4 will be able to interpret that a bit better and follow through with the answers that you're probably more looking for. But obviously with a voice assistant where you want sort of quick responses, something like GPT 3.5 will provide that sort of extra level of realism. In this case, I'm just going to choose GPT 3.5, but in some cases, if you've got a really long, complex prompt, once again, going to go through this further in the video, but I'm just going to choose GPT 3.5 for now. And just below this, we've got our knowledge base. So our knowledge base, once again, is where we upload files to, and then we can assign certain files to particular assistants. So in this case, we can now just select any of the documents that we've uploaded in the documents section to a particular assistant. So if we wanted to upload, in this case, the menu to our pizza restaurant, we could do that here. Simply upload the file, attach the file, and then we can just prompt the assistant to then reference that information. So we could say, answer this using the knowledge base information, and then it's going to start to pull info from the knowledge base. Now just below this, we've got temperature. Now temperature is the randomness of the output. So we're able to control how random we want the outputs to be. So if we want it to be really strict and follow our prompt precisely, we can bring this temperature all the way down to something like 0.1, where its response must follow the prompt exactly and output exactly what we're looking for. Now, if we wanted a bit more of a creative response, we could bump this temperature all the way up to something like 2, but there are sort of benefits and disadvantages of both ends. Now below this, we've got max tokens. This is essentially the maximum amount that the AI can sort of respond with at once. So depending on your type of assistant that you're building, if you wanted to output a lot of information at once, you can bump this max tokens up to a much higher figure, and then it can output more words at once. So essentially, I like to keep this very low because I don't like the bot to sort of go on a huge conversation saying lots of things, because people on the phone aren't going to really like that. I like to keep it nice, short, and concise. So the way, if we bump this number down to a very short amount, maybe put this at 100, the responses are just going to be shorter responses. They're going to be more concise. And I typically find for voice assistants specifically, a lower token amount is better, just because we don't want it to obviously generate an entire paragraph or an entire book of information, and then you're on the phone with it and it's reading it for about 10 minutes. You obviously don't want that to happen. So just making sure that if we reduce the tokens, we're essentially forcing it to be concise and short in its answers. Now below this, we've got a function that says detect speech emotion. And this is actually able to detect the emotion of the person talking to the assistant. So if some guy starts yelling at the assistant, ideally that this will actually pick it up and it's able to add that into the prompt here. So obviously if they start yelling at it, we can pick that up and go, oh no, like sorry. If they start yelling at you, you can say sorry and continue on, or do something different. We can actually prompt it to handle that situation. I don't typically necessarily use this feature a whole heap. I haven't tested it enough to see what the accuracy is, but that's definitely something that you could use if you wanted to create a much more sort of human-like system where obviously if someone's yelling at it, it's not just going to continue on like nothing's happened. So that is it for the model settings. I'll now jump into transcriber. So the reason that this is actually important is that obviously the way that the information is interpreted determines what it's going to go ahead and understand and output. So if we say something and it obviously transcribes it wrong as being something different, the model is going to then generate an answer that's completely different to the question we had asked it. Now, Vapi does have 2 different providers for the transcriptions. You should probably test this depending on the sort of accent. I think is probably going to be the most important thing in terms of the providers for transcription. So if somebody isn't necessarily fluent at speaking a particular language, the provider and the transcriber is going to be pretty critical in that process. So really playing around with this and making sure that it's consistent in transcribing the text that your users or your target audience in your country, in your accent, is going to be able to perform better, because obviously we don't want it to transcribe something that we've said to be something completely different, because that's going to mess up the entire sort of flow. because obviously this is transcribing your voice, putting it into text, and then sending it to the AI model. Now jumping into the voice settings, this is one of the most important parts of building our assistants. This is where we control how the assistant actually sounds. So the first settings that we get at the top here is the provider. So once again, there are multiple different providers for generating the sound. So in this case, what happens is we obviously send a question by asking it. It's then transcribed. The AI model receives that transcription of text. That text is then sent to this provider that we've chosen. So in this case, I've set 11 Labs. 11 Labs would receive that text. It would then obviously turn it into an AI voice response, send it back to Vapi, and then repeat it to the user over the phone. Now we use 11 Labs for all of our builds, but there are a multitude of different options for different types of voices. Some might sound better for different use cases, for different scripts that it needs to read, or different accents that you want to get. But I mostly use 11 Labs. There's also different costs associated with different providers. I believe that the provider for a voice is one of the most expensive parts of these systems. So if you look at the bar at the top here, these are all the different costs associated with the per minute cost of running the assistant. And this yellow bit is 11 Labs. So taking up quite a bit of the entire cost here is 11 Labs. We can reduce this by obviously choosing different models. If we choose something like LMNT, it's going to go down to 3 cents. Choose 11 Labs, it's now up to 4 cents. So obviously different voices and different providers are going to cost different amounts. Scrolling down further, we've got our additional configurations. One that I really like is the background sound. So we can actually choose to add a background sound to our callers. So at the moment, they've got either an office sound or just nothing. I believe they are adding functionality to upload custom sounds, or they're just going to add a bunch of different sort of default sounds in here as well. This once again adds to the realism. If you're being called by a call center, it's probably going to sound like an office in the background. So you can just toggle that on if it's relevant to your assistant, obviously. So just below this, we've got punctuation as well. Now, this is a really important function that allows us to create sort of silences and breaks during our conversation. So we want to essentially enable the different types of characters, and these characters correspond with different sort of responses to the AI. Now, I will cover this further in the prompt engineering part of this video, but ultimately characters like the sort of dashes or the commas or the pauses, these different types of characters make the response generate a bit differently. So if we wanted to say something, pause for a little bit and then continue on, we want to actually enable these characters to be able to be read by Vapi and then to actually create those pauses in the conversation. Once again, I'll go through this more in the prompt engineering part of this video, but ultimately just enable the ones you want to use and then include them in your prompt, and then it will obviously pick them up through Vapi and then create those pauses for you. Now, just below the punctuation, we have filler injection. So I've just asked the AI to give a bit of a better response for what fillers are. So in this case, fillers refer to words or sounds that people often use in natural speech to pause thought, to hesitate, or to signify that they are still speaking while they organize their thoughts. So it's given us some examples here. Like stuff like this, when people are thinking, organizing their thoughts, we're able to obviously input these types of things to make it a bit more natural and less robotic, like it says. So by enabling this, it's just going to be a little bit more realistic. It's going to be pausing on its thoughts and collecting its thoughts, and it's going to sound a little less robotic. So just below this, we've got back channeling. Now, back channeling is similar but different to the fillers. So in this case, whilst the bot is listening to what the user is saying, it's just going to be like or confirm what they're saying as well. So it's going to be making it sound a bit more natural as well. So ultimately, the fillers are for when the bot is actually talking itself and it's trying to generate its thoughts. It might just start to pause a little bit, make it sound a bit more realistic, and that it's not consistently outputting information all the time. And then this is for when it's not speaking and it's actually listening, it's going to make these sort of sounds. Now, just below this, we've got model. Now, this is for 11 Labs specifically, but what we would choose is right here. It says use 11 Labs multilingual if you're using a non-English transcriber. Otherwise, use 11 Labs Turbo. So I'm just going to be using 11 Labs Turbo. I'm not using the multilingual function, but if you were, you can go ahead and use this one if you're not using English and you want to use it for a different language. So now just below this, we've got 4 different sort of configurations for the model. One being stability, clarity plus similarity, style exaggeration, and then optimizing the streaming latency. So for stability, this is how sort of expressive and emotional we want the responses to be. So if I hover over this, increasing variability can make speech more expressive. With output variation between regenerations, it can also lead to instabilities. So if I go ahead and drag this all the way down, we're going to get a much more sort of vibrant, more emotional, more sort of realistic sounding system because it's obviously more expressive, sounds a bit more realistic and reacts to the sort of emotions a bit better. However, this does cause instabilities. But if we go down to the end here for stability, increasing stability will make the voice more consistent between regenerations, but I can also make it sound a bit monotone. So on longer text fragments, we can recommend lowering this value. So we've got two sort of options here. We can either go really low variable output, and this is going to be very expressive, very emotional, but the chances are it's probably going to mess up and cause some artifacts that are going to make it sound really unrealistic. So I like to keep it sort of in the middle at 0.5, potentially 0.6. And it really depends on the voice provider or the voice assistant that you're using as well. In terms of stability, making it monotone can work really well for some voices, but some voices might not sound really good if it's very monotone. And it depends on the purpose of the assistant as well. Obviously, if we're using sort of a call center replacement system, it's probably fine if they're not, jumping around all the time. But if we're building a salesperson for real estate or something, maybe we want it to be a bit more expressive. We want to lower this value to get a bit more emotion out of them. Now below this, we've got clarity plus similarity. So putting this on high enhances the overall voice clarity and target speaker similarity. So very high values can also cause artifacts. So really adjusting this setting to find the optimal value is encouraged. That's what it says. So increasing this can really help to make it sound very similar. So in some cases, depending on the system, once again, this really requires a lot of testing. You really got to just configure this, play around with it and get it to be really good. But ultimately, if we drag this all the way up here, it's going to sound very similar and be very consistent. But the downside is that it could cause sort of artifacts because it's trying to meet that same sort of similar sound every time. It's working a little bit harder to do that. So I like to keep this at about 0.6. Once again, sort of in the middle area, 0.7 maybe. But if you go all the way too low, we can get a bit better consistency, less likely to break. However, obviously it's going to be a little less emotional. It's going to be a little less consistent. So the outputs might sound a little bit different. So it's not going to be 100% super realistic. But once again, put it in the middle. I think that's a safe bet. And that's what I've been using. Once again, it really depends on the voice sound that you're using. And it could really range depending on whatever that is. Now, style exaggeration, very similar to stability, I'd say. Exaggeration is really exaggerating the audio and in the speech. So if we want it to be a lot more emotional and we want it to have that level of realism and not so monotone, saying the same sort of level of voice at the same time, we can increase this up to exaggerated. I do keep it at 0. It does say here that setting it to 0 will greatly increase the generation speed. So if you want it to be quicker as well, increasing this to be quicker. But obviously I like this because it's just more consistent. It's more stable to keep it at this. And I find that generation at this, it's still pretty quick and sounds pretty good, but maybe keeping this at about 0.2, 0.3 might be good as well. Now below this, we've got streaming latency. If we want to increase the latency on how long it takes to respond, we can do that if we'd like as well. The default value is set to 1, so I like to just keep it there. And then finally, for the voice settings, we've got our use speaker boost. This boosts the similarity of the speech and the voice at the cost of some generation speed. So you can simply just toggle that on if you'd like to use it. And it's supposedly going to just keep it consistent in how it says. So one sentence should sound very similar to the next sentence. And you can just enable that by toggling it. Once again, you really just need to test all the different settings, put them in completely different configurations, call it a few times and really just test, is it actually working? Is it generating consistent, accurate and realistic sounds? If not, make some changes. And all these settings should assist you in getting a really realistic sounding system, all from this voice settings. I'm now going to jump into the function settings. So functions are like I said earlier, functions are the sort of custom automations that we're going to run in the background or after our assistant has called somebody. So for this particular example, for this sort of pizza store, I've created a function called order. So in this case, we're actually capturing an order. If we want to talk to the user, capture their order details about what they want to buy, where they live, what their name is, we want to capture this data and send that data off to obviously maybe some sort of ordering system. So in this case, we've created a function, and this function, by simply just clicking create new function, we have given it a name called order because we're creating an order. We've given it a description called this is where the details of the order will be stored. Only run this once all properties are complete. So this is our sort of prompt to give it the context as to when to actually run this function. And then within our functions, we can have properties, and properties are the specific data points that we want to capture for our function. So obviously, if we're capturing an order, what are the bits of information that we want to capture within that order? Well, in this case, I've created a property by clicking on properties, creating a new property, I've created one called name, and name is the name of the customer, of course. And then this is set to a string, so that is just text. And then pretty simple, just create a property, add in the description as to what you want to capture, and this will automatically capture that name information. So this will essentially run in the background. This will be constantly looking for the name of the customer, and then it will constantly look for our other properties as well. So I've got items. This is a list of all the items ordered by the customer. This should include the exact food name and exact food size. I've got this set to an array. So an array is essentially just like a list. So obviously if somebody orders 2 pizzas or they order 2 different types of pizzas, we want to list that out in what's called an array, and we can do that by selecting that option. Going down to address, we want to store the customer's full address because we want to know where to send the order to. In this case, I've selected string again. Also, they've got a Boolean, which is sort of like a true or false. So if we wanted to essentially do the lead qualification system, we could say, are they qualified? Yes or no, or true or false. That's the Boolean value. We can do number. So if we wanted to actually get the order value, order total, or a number specifically, we can use the number. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Ultimately, we're just capturing a set of values to then send off to a particular endpoint. Now for this endpoint, I've got a URL here, and this URL is a make.com webhook. Now, when I cover make.com, you're going to get a much better understanding of exactly where this has come from, how this works, and what exactly this URL is used for. But ultimately, all this is doing is sending data off to make.com. If you remember, that is our automations platform that is going to process this data and then do something with it, whether it's just storing the data or it's actually then sending that off to, in this case, maybe the kitchen. However that would happen, we can do that through make.com. Scrolling down a bit, they actually have some predefined functions as well. So in this case, we've got an enable end call function, and this will allow the assistant to end the call from its side. So if we want the assistant to end the call and not them, we can actually just toggle this on and go down, scroll down all the way to the bottom and type in an end call phrase. So this end call phrase is just something that the assistant would say, and then it would trigger the bot to simply just end the call. So if we wanted to prompt it to output, thanks for the call, we'll speak to you later, goodbye. And we could essentially take that phrase, put that into this part of the prompt right here. And then anytime it essentially says that, it will just end the call itself. And so that way you're not just stuck on a call. This can help with cost efficiency as well. Obviously you don't want them to be stuck on the call using up valuable minutes. It'll just end it right away. So that's a good function to enable. Another one of the predefined functions is dialing the keypad. So we can actually get the assistant to actually dial the keypad. I've also asked the AI here to give you a bit of a better explanation. But we can see here, this feature is part of additional capabilities given to Vapi assistants, allowing them to perform actions beyond simple conversation, such as transferring calls, ending calls, and in this case, interacting with keypads during calls. So we can interact with the keypad with that function. And just below this, we've also got the forwarding phone number function. Now the forwarding phone number function essentially forwards the phone number depending on a set of conditions. So we can enter in our phone number right here. And then in our prompt, we can say, if something happens, or if this specific thing happens, or if this specific thing is said, forward the phone number. So that sort of forward the phone number is already automatically prompted into this predefined function. And it will automatically start to forward the phone number to this phone number. And so you can set that to your own phone number. And if something bad happens, it will automatically start to call you, and then you can take over and handle the call from there. So that is it for the functions section. Once again, I'm going to go through a bit more into the specific building out of the functions through the make.com walkthrough. Now jumping into the advanced section, these settings you don't necessarily need to use. I don't particularly use them that often, but it is good to know what settings are available to you through the advanced settings. So the first setting that we have here is the HIPAA compliant setting. Now the HIPAA compliant setting is specifically for medical use cases. So if you're using this in the sort of medical area, obviously being able to be HIPAA compliant is probably going to be required for that particular assistant. And you can do that through Vapi, simply just enable it. And one of the things that you'll notice it's just done is actually disabled recordings. So obviously for HIPAA compliance, you can't record the calls, especially if it's going to be handling sensitive information. So one good feature there, enabling HIPAA compliance. But obviously if you don't need HIPAA compliance, you can turn that off and then you're actually allowed to now record the calls. Enable that, we can actually record the conversation with the assistant. And so these recordings are stored in the call logs like I showed you earlier. So just enable that and then go to call logs and you can just play any of the recordings that you like. Now just below this, we've got pipeline configuration. And these are just another host of settings that we can use to configure some of the delays, interruptions for our particular voice system. So So the first one is the silence timeout. So this is just how long it waits for the person to respond back. So at the moment it's set to 30 seconds. I'd like to keep that a bit lower, maybe 10 seconds. Obviously you don't want to be sitting there for 30 seconds waiting for them to respond. Chances are they didn't hear you, they didn't hear what you said. And so you want to keep that really low, particularly from what I've seen. Maybe you want to increase that depending on the assistant's use case, but keeping that low makes it a little bit more natural from my experience. Then we've got the response delay. So this is how delayed it is in responding to the user's question that it sent us. I like to keep this at either 0 or 0.1. Obviously I want the least amount of delay possible, but depending on the use case, you can increase that if required. Large language model request delay. So this is how delayed it is in actually generating its answers. Once again, sort of similar to the response delay. Really just got to play around with this and see whether or not it suits your particular assistant. Once again, I like to keep this on the low side of things to keep the delay as minimal as possible. So the next option here is the number of words to actually interrupt the assistant. So when we're talking to the bot, we can actually say something while it's talking and it's going to stop and it's going to obviously wait for what we have to say and then continue on again. So it's actually recognizing that we're saying stuff and it's making it a bit more natural in that sense. So one of the configurations we can change is the amount of words to actually detect when to interrupt the assistant. So if we set that to 1 word, it will pick up. If you said 1 word, it'll stop the assistant. Now you do have to be a bit careful with this one. If we set it to 1 word and then the person on the phone coughs or something happens, they make a noise, it might pick it up as a word and interrupt the assistant. And it's going to be a bit awkward if it's just stuck there waiting for how long your silence timeout is. That's why I like to keep it about 2 or 3 words, just to really confirm they have started talking about something and that we do need to stop talking. Then finally, we've got the maximum duration, and this is the max amount of time that we want the call to go for. So we can set limits as to how long the calls are going to be. This is going to be helpful for managing costs once again. So obviously if we're sending out thousands of calls, we do want to make sure that obviously these calls aren't going for an hour each, because then obviously that's going to use up a lot of our cost per minute. So we can just reduce this to a set of minutes that we want to keep it to. So if the call should only take 5 minutes at max, just set it to 5 minutes. And then obviously if it's hit past 5 minutes, then it's probably just gonna have to take that loss. If you're trying to talk to a lead or something, obviously if it's going on for 5 minutes, it should probably end anyway. But that really comes down to your prompting once again, making sure that the assistant is efficient in what it's saying. It doesn't go off on tangents and talk to them about random stuff. It just goes down the script, follows exactly what it needs to say and gets the call done as quickly as possible to save on costs. But we can once again really help reduce that by putting in a maximum call duration. Now further scrolling down, we've got more sort of advanced settings here that are really used for some of the custom coding side of things on Vapi. In this case, we can put in a URL to actually send all of the information that's occurring through the assistant. So function calls, end of call reports, anything that's happening, it can be sent off to a particular URL. So we can set that up using make.com if you'd like. Once again, not necessarily required for building out your first assistant, but something to look into if you want to actually control sort of whatever's happening to the assistant and get all of that data back. This is where you would do that by putting in your server URL. The same goes with the client messages. These are messages that are going to be sent off to a different endpoint. We can choose all the different data that we're sending off. So very similar to the server URL, configure all of the data and how that's managed through those settings. Server messages, once again, very similar. So if we want to choose what's being sent off here, we can just go say we want the end of call report, function calls, updates. We can have that all sent off live during the call. Then below this, a feature that is actually pretty useful is the voicemail message. So if the assistant goes to voicemail, it's forwarded to voicemail. We can actually have it say something just right here. So we can say, you've reached our voicemail, please leave a message after the beep and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So that's a default text that they've put in there. It'll just say this to the assistant if it gets sent and forwarded to voicemail. Then all the way at the bottom here, we've got an end of call message. So if the assistant identifies that it needs to end the call through our prompt, it'll just read out this message. So you can say, thank you for contacting us. Have a great day. So it just ends off the call on a more natural note. So that is it for our Vapi walkthrough. Hopefully now you're much more up to speed as to exactly what Vapi is, what the functions do, what the capabilities of Vapi are, and you should now be more than prepared to be able to actually start building these systems for both the inbound and outbound callers. Now jumping into make.com, the automations platform that we're going to use to mostly build our functions and connect to Vapi to run automations in the background. So this right here is make.com. This is essentially a no-code automations platform. You can see here, this is essentially what it looks like. So we're able to process automations and communicate information between different applications through this sort of step-by-step workflow. So this is a no-code workflow automations platform. And one of the really big benefits of Make.com is that it is connected to thousands and thousands of different applications. As you can see here, we can essentially just load a whole heap of different applications that we can communicate to for different purposes. So one of the automations that I'm going to showcase later in the video is going to be a Webflow form submission for our inbound caller system. That's going to look for a new Webflow form submission. It's then going to use Vapi to make an API call. So making an API call through Make to Vapi to then call the person who had submitted a lead form. So this right here is Make.com, and these are some of the automations that I'm actually using within my business. I've got a few automations for taking new leads through Calendly and putting that into a Notion CRM. I've got some automations for my resource hub where you can get access to all the automation templates that I'm going to be using throughout this video in my resource hub. This essentially just takes a form submission and then sends that user an email. I've got meeting qualifiers. I've got YouTube video transcriptions for my blogs. So this is just an example of a series of automations that I've got built for my own business here and automatically running on Make.com. So the main thing that you're going to be using on Make.com are scenarios, and these are essentially the automations. So each scenario is a new automation or new workflow where you're going to build something new in. So in this instance, each of these is a new scenario. If I go ahead and click into a particular scenario, each scenario is built with a series of modules, and these modules all connect to each other. So this automation will look for all my new YouTube videos, take that YouTube video, it then turns it into a blog post and sends it to Webflow where it uploads it to my website. So each of these are called modules. And like I said, it's just a step-by-step process. You take a module, it moves to the next one, then the next one, and continues on until it reaches the objective that you're looking for. We're able to add new modules by clicking on the plus button here, and then it gives us access to all of the applications that Make has, tons and tons of applications. And then when we click on a particular application here, if I go ahead and click on the Google Calendar one, we can see that when you click on the application, you get a host of different events or actions to occur, particularly within that application. So in this case, if we want to get a calendar, create a calendar, update a calendar, delete a calendar, it's got all these sort of preset actions that can occur for that API. And it has that for all of these applications. So if we want to do LinkedIn, we've got all of these different applications here as well. If we want to do Facebook Messenger, more actions. So a ton of different actions to very easily do what we want through an automation step by step using these modules on Make. The way that Make charges is through operations. So you can see here, I'm using the core plan, $10 a month. It gives me 10,000 operations per month, and that's enough to run the automations for my particular business. But in this case, obviously you can choose however many operations you need. And in some cases, depending on the volume of calls that you're going to be doing, I'm going to show you how to set up the calling automation for cold calling, as well as inbound calls. And you'll see exactly how many operations that's actually going to go ahead and use. But in some cases, you might need the Teams plan, or you can buy additional operations. So you can really do as many calls as you need. If you are familiar with Zapier, this is a lot cheaper than Zapier. These operations and their monthly costs are much cheaper. It's much more efficient than Zapier. So if you're familiar with it, this is a much better option. So now I'm going to go through one of these scenarios that will enable us to actually send data from Vapi into our Make automation. And this is going to be used for our function calls. So like I showcased previously with this sort of pizza example, running a function call to save a pizza order, what I went ahead and set up was a series of properties to capture the name, items, and address. And then I added in this server URL. Now this server URL came directly from Make.com. So the URL comes from what is called a webhook. And so in this instance of Make.com, the first block here is a webhook. And so the first block in each Make scenario is where it starts from. And what we've got set up is this webhook, and this webhook is set to run immediately. So we can essentially send a request to a webhook, and this automation will run automatically. It's not going to wait for anything. It's just going to run right away. So by just clicking on this webhook here, once you create a webhook, it's going to go ahead and just give you a URL. Very simply, we can just click on this, create a webhook. It'll automatically generate a URL for us. Click copy address to clipboard, go back to Vapi and paste it in your server URL. And now when you're making calls, it's going to start to send and connect directly with Make.com. And then all we have to do after this is add in whatever application we want to send the data into. So in this case, what it's going to do is send essentially a list of information that says name, item, address. And within those properties are going to be the obviously data assigned with those values. And we're going to see that on Make.com. And by using maybe something like Google Sheets, we can then save that data into Google Sheets. So hopefully you can see how simple Make.com is and how easy it is to actually connect directly to Vapi to run a whole host of automations where we just need a webhook to send the data into, and then we can get connected to the thousands of applications that Make provides us with, and we can send that data off to wherever we want and do whatever we want with it. Now, additionally, if we wanted to send data back into the bot, we can do that as well. And all we need to use is a webhook response. And in this case, we can send the webhook to any type of application, manipulate that data, change that data, send a request to get information back, and then send it back to Vapi. Now, the purpose of doing this is maybe we want to search up the price of Bitcoin. If we wanted to get any type of live data, we need to obviously make a request somewhere, because it's obviously not going to be stored within our prompt or anything. We need to get that live data back, and we can do a webhook response. Very simply, once this process here has occurred, it's just going to land on the webhook response. We can just add in whatever bit of data we want to from here, and then this will get sent directly back to Vapi. Vapi will automatically process this data. So we can just send it back whatever we want. And then if it finds it relevant to talk about, it will just use that information because it's being sent into the prompt, and it's trying to use that information as best as it can to really help make a really fluent conversation. So hopefully you now have a really good understanding of how Make.com can directly connect to Vapi for function calls and automations. I'm now going to go into prompt engineering for AI voice callers to get you ready to actually start building inbound and outbound callers. Going right into it, prompt engineering, how to properly build AI phone callers. Well, just going back a little bit, I'll go through what actual prompts are. So an AI prompt is really any form of text, question, information, or coding that communicates to AI what response you're looking for. So by using natural language, we can actually communicate with the AI. So in this case, we are building sort of a set of instructions for the AI to follow to assist us for specific needs. So what does this actually look like? Well, AI phone caller developer platforms such as Vapi allows for the input of prompts to control our assistants. So I've got a screenshot of the platform Vapi on the right here. I'm going to go through what Vapi is in just a second, but essentially what we're able to do is provide a set of instructions using natural language. So we're essentially just talking to it like we're talking to a human, and we're just telling it how to act. So we use Vapi for all our voice projects. So Vapi enables us to build pretty advanced callers that sound quite realistic. They respond quickly and can interpret our prompts accurately. There are a host of features that Vapi provides, which you will learn throughout this video as well. Now back to the prompts, the AI model can actually interpret this prompt and follow the instructions, which then guides its responses. So it's actually reading this prompt and it's using this prompt to guide its responses and act the way we told it to. The AI will also have memory, so it's going to actually understand any previous questions and answers we've given it, and that's going to get fed back into the prompt, so it has that sort of context. Just very briefly, I'm going to go over what a large language model is. So a large language model are very large, deep learning models that are pre-trained on vast amounts of data. So just think of this as the brain of the AI assistant. This brain is trained on lots of information, and it's able to contextualize the prompt and instructions we've given it and turn that into something that is more natural sounding. So this graph here gives you a better idea of how the actual sort of memory works. So what happens is that we prompt the assistant, and then this gets sent to the AI. It's then outputted to the user, but then that output goes into what is called a context window. And the context window is just giving the AI more information to work with. And in this case, we're giving it the previous questions in that context window to add context to the conversation that's happening. So what actually is prompt engineering? Well, prompt engineering is just the process of actually structuring an instruction that can be interpreted and understood by a generative AI model. So this is the process of actually creating our prompts. Now, prompt engineering has become quite an in-demand role for businesses due to the expanding need for generative AI in businesses. So as you can see on the right there, AI prompt engineers earn $300,000 salaries. This clearly shows that businesses can see the value in AI prompt engineering, and that there's definitely a future for being able to learn this exact skill. So why is this actually important? Why are prompts important? And why is prompt engineering something that's so valuable? Well, prompts are really the most integral part of building these AI agents. So without really clear instructions for our intended outputs from these systems, it can actually start to output what we call hallucinations. So hallucinations are incorrect or misleading results that AI models generate. So when an AI is not instructed clearly, the output from the AI will change from what was intended. Now, this really highlights the importance of prompting and testing. One of the solutions to hallucinations is guardrails. So for specific AI agents, you may not want the AI to actually deviate from its intended purpose. So for example, a sales agent should stay on script and not converse about random irrelevant topics that the user inquires about. It should just stick to that sales script that we've given it to follow with that to then obviously meet the call objective. So if that call objective was to set an appointment we would put in place a set of guardrails to ensure that we get to that call outcome, and that if somebody says something, it doesn't go down a tangent or go down some random irrelevant topics and start talking about those things and never end up booking the appointment. Now on to knowledge bases. AI-powered knowledge bases are comprehensive repositories of information made up of several different kinds of content. So we can store large amounts of information outside of our prompt and then retrieve that relevant information from the knowledge base without needing to include everything in the prompt. So when a user asks a question, before asking the AI, before sort of prompting the AI to then generate a response, we can actually search the knowledge base for anything that seems relevant or similar to the information or the question that they just asked. And it's doing that by using its semantic meaning. So then if this question correlates to any of the information within our knowledge base, we're going to then go ahead and pull that information, pull that chunk of information from our knowledge base and then put it into the prompt. So then the AI has the context, like that context window I talked about. It's putting that information from the knowledge base in the context window to refer to when answering the question. Now, the reason that we actually use a knowledge base is something called prompt efficiency. So we're doing this to save on costs. Now, it is possible to store large amounts of information directly into our prompt. However, the more we input into the prompt, the greater the generation cost will actually be. Now, this does depend on the project requirements and the actual voice system that you're building. So it may be better to store certain information into the prompt, or it might be better to upload all of the information into a knowledge base. It just comes down to testing the outputs. Onto testing, creating a prompt is not as simple as just getting it right the first time. You'll probably notice that to actually create the assistant, it's pretty quick. You can get an assistant built in probably 10 minutes. If you just give it a very straightforward prompt, there's only 1 or 2 sentences, you can get it to act different and you can get it to act the way you want in about 2 sentences. However, this is not going to be consistent. It's not going to be reliable. And you're going to need to do a lot more than that to get it working well. And so like I put here, even if the conversation seems normal initially and it does what you want and it gets that call objection, variations of conversation can cause hallucinations. So one answer different to what the script says, it's going to cause a hallucination. If somebody responds with a word that it wasn't expecting, it could cause a hallucination and it could breach those guardrails we built. So there's a lot that needs to be done in testing to make sure this works properly. So that's why I think that testing is the most important phase in actually creating your prompt. So something that we do at our agency, we actually analyze the transcripts of the conversations and use this data to continuously improve the prompt to ensure reliability. So this is once again something that we extensively value within our agency because getting an assistant running is pretty quick, but getting an assistant to reliably and consistently meet the call objectives, that takes a lot of time to perfect. I will come back to testing and data later when I cover more of the key concepts. So this here is the prompt lifecycle, and the reason I put this in here is to really reiterate the importance of testing. So you can see here, the first 2 stages are design, so that's sort of creating our prompt, thinking of what our prompt is going to be. Implementation, which is then when our prompt is ready to go and we can now use it and test it and start meeting those call objectives. Evaluation is when we can actually start running these tests and getting data back. Refinement is then taking that data and then improving upon our script. Iteration is then testing different prompts to meet those call objectives. Maybe we found that the refinement wasn't enough and we needed to iterate over different methods to finally get to something good. Validation is then testing these different iterations to make sure it's actually working properly. And then finally, we're deploying it to the end users and testing with real people. And then we're doing maintenance to actually ensure that it is working and we're consistently checking to see if this thing is actually doing what it's meant to. So of these 8 steps of the life cycle of a prompt, only 2 were for actually getting it set up. Everything else was to do with testing and deploying through the evaluation, iteration, validation. This is all to do with testing, and only step 1 and 2 was actually building it. So hopefully that gives you a better idea as to the importance and value of testing prompts, which is something that we deeply value within our agency. So of how we actually structure our prompts, there is no really one size fits all structure. Depending on the complexity of the assistant, it may require a couple of tweaks, or it may require thousands of users to actually test, and then the data needs to be analyzed and adjustments made. It really depends on how easy it is to meet those call objectives, how many questions we're asking the user, and what these specific actions we're looking to do are. So jumping into the prompt structure, the first thing that we will go through is the role. So who they actually are, and who they are is the assistant. So we're talking to the assistant here. The role of the assistant directly aims to communicate to the AI who they are. For example, a salesperson or a lead qualifier, an appointment setter, or technical support, we would tell the AI who they are. So the purpose of this is to ensure that the AI aligns its output with who they are. So obviously a salesperson should sell, an appointment setter should set appointments. Now this will also impact the personality of the responses. So prompting it to be a salesperson can cause it to be a bit more descriptive because they're trying to convince them to make a sale. And then prompting it to assist users as maybe a technical support person can make its answers more structured and step-by-step as it's trying to break down problems and make it easy to understand. So jumping into Vapi.ai here, I'm going to do the walkthrough of actually building out an assistant, which is going to be an inbound sales assistant for Apple. So in this case, to build our role, this is what our role would look like. So who they are, you are an experienced salesperson for the technology company Apple. Your role is to help customers purchase our products. So very simply, you can expand upon this obviously, but very fundamentally, the role is just telling it who they are. Moving on to the next part of our prompt, we're then going to cover what they actually do, and this is going to be the task. So this is a more specific goal for the assistant to actually align its responses with. For example, we could say that your task is to qualify leads, or your task is to set appointments, your task is to convince customers to buy our products. So jumping back into Vapi, in this case for our inbound sales assistant for Apple, we could say that their task is to converse with the customer, find their needs, solve their pain points, and sell them our products. The third part of our prompt are the specifics, so how they actually do it. This is how they actually should achieve the task that we just set out for them. So for example, follow a sales script. So if we wanted to build a salesperson and we told them that the point is to sell them products, we might tell them to follow a sales script more specifically to make that happen, or collect the name and email to book an appointment. So if it's an appointment setter, we then want to more specifically tell it we're actually going to be collecting the name and email to book the appointment. So for our inbound sales caller at Apple, we would then say for our specifics, you are a highly intelligent salesperson. You will converse with the customer about the specifications of our products. You must closely follow the scripts provided. These specifics are very important to my career. Please follow these. Your ability to closely follow the scripts is integral to the business's bottom line. Now, you'll notice that I said you must closely follow the scripts provided. Now, I haven't provided the scripts in this section. I'll come back to that in just a second. I'll actually come back to that in just a second, but just make sure that if we are following a sales script, that it needs to be in the specifics because that's what it's going to be closely following to achieve the objective of the task. And for this last line here, this is something called emotional prompting, and I will come back to this as well. Now, the fourth step in our prompt is the context. So this will ensure that the AI has actually got complete knowledge on why they're actually doing what they're doing. And this just gives the AI a sense of purpose, which is actually proven to increase output results. So obviously, the more that we remind it of the key objectives, if it's a salesperson, the more that we remind it that it is a salesperson, the more that it's going to align its output with that. So in Vapi, for the context, this is how that would look. We would just put context. So we would put the business, we are Apple Inc. and we provide technology products to the world. For example, the iPhone and iPad. Now, obviously, if you're actually building this for Apple, you would have it a bit more extensive and a bit more accurate. But obviously, I'm just trying to demonstrate the purpose of these context points and how that is meant to help out in the entire script. Below this, we've got the what we do. So this is we help people connect digitally with world-class devices. Once again, this is quite a broad example with such a large company, but if you had a very specific company, maybe it's a real estate agency, and you wanted to clearly outline what we do, it's going to help the AI just get a better understanding on exactly what its purpose is to align its outputs with exactly what it should be doing. Just quickly, I wanted to cover markdown formatting, which is something that you can use to more contextually communicate the different parts of your prompt to the AI. So in the case of prompting the context to the AI, we can actually have different sections and subsections of the context, and we can separate this using markdown formatting. So markdown formatting is really just a way of separating elements of our prompt, and markdown formatting is something that OpenAI actually used to train their AI models. So just by splitting up the headings of our different sections of the prompt, for example, we can see here, we've got the context and it's got a hashtag in front of it. So that's what markdown formatting is. It's essentially just putting in these hashtags to separate the different headings. And that is essentially just marking those as different headings, communicating to the AI, giving it a bit more structure as to what is relevant to what. So in the case of context, we've got context with the one hashtag and we've got the business. So now it knows that the business is related to context. So it's actually looking for the context of the business. So you can see how the AI might get confused there of what it's actually talking about. But by using this markdown formatting, we're now able to more easily communicate the different structures of our prompt. It's going to be much more able to find what it's looking for and output much more accurate answers. So like I just said, OpenAI trained their model's knowledge using markdown formatting. So this format will ensure an increase in the accuracy when actually ranking elements of the prompt. In specific outputs, some parts of the prompt won't be required and some parts will be required. So sort of just clearly identifying that with headings ensures that it's just less work for the AI to try and figure out what the answer is. Now, number 5, examples. This is going to be the most powerful aspect of our prompt engineering. So this is where we directly state example inputs and corresponding outputs. So like I just mentioned earlier, where we referenced the sales script, this is where we then put in the sales script, because this is the example that we want it to follow. In this case, I've got a script here, very basic, but we would position this towards the AI. So we're saying you, which is the AI, hello, how can I help you today? So ideally that's what it will start off the conversation with. And then if I said, I'm doing good, I'm looking to book an appointment, we can then structure this script to then have a response back for that. So now it's going to say, sure, what day would you like to book? And then if I said, does Monday work? We can continue on this script, on and on, and we can create different script variations as well. So we're not just going to have this as the one script. We can create a script for if they're not interested. We can create a script for if they are interested. We can create script variations, and it just requires more prompt engineering to obviously go down the right path, the right script for the right person. For the examples, this is how that would look. We would just put examples as a heading. We can then put the different scripts as different sort of subheadings. So hashtag sales department script. So maybe they want to talk with the sales department. We can just put in our script. So hi, is this Brendan? Yes. Looks like you're interested in iPad. Something like this is just obviously a very basic sales script. We can go a lot bigger than this, putting that all into the prompt. So these examples really just helps to ensure consistency in its responses and make the AI do a lot less work. That being said, following a script requires quite significant testing. So especially to ensure a really natural sounding conversation, without really properly conditioning it, the AI will sort of continue its script without acknowledging the user's real response. So obviously we don't want them to say something that wasn't along the lines of our script, and then for the AI to completely ignore what they just said and just say something that's not even relevant to what they just said, because it's going to be an immediate switch that they're talking to an AI, and then they're going to lose that lead. So number 6, notes. This is where we can actually add our conditions and fixes. So if the conversation goes off script, we can actually tell it to bring it back to the script whilst maintaining a seamless conversation. Or we could say if a customer asks a question deviating from the script, answer that question accurately, then flow back into the script. So once again, this is just adding in some notes. This might work, this might not work. You might have to add a lot more than this to actually get it to work properly, depending on how big your sales script is. But obviously we need to add in these notes to make it sure that it actually understands not just to strictly follow the script, but to accurately answer the question, flow back into the script, and then meet the call objective. For our notes, this is how that would look. We would just put notes as a heading, and then we can say, please ensure you follow the script closely. So just reiterating that this is an important factor, and saying if a customer asks a question deviating from the script, answer the question accurately, then flow back into the script. So just conditioning it to ensure that it's going to be outputting a seamless conversation. Now, in a lot of the builds that we've done at our agency, this note section gets filled up quite a lot. So you're likely to get a lot more than 2 notes in this part of the prompt. You might have 20 or 30 notes in this prompt, really covering and really strictly prompting it to output exactly what you're looking for. So when you're testing and adjusting, the note section is one of the places that you can add these adjustments to. Now onto function calls. So function calls isn't necessarily a part of the prompt structure, but it is something that you will likely need to include throughout your prompt at different parts of the prompt to make sure that we are running functions. So one of the reasons that we use Vapi within our agency is that it enables us to actually pull external data into the conversation live. So for example, if we wanted to get customer data from a CRM system or book an appointment live, we can do this via something called a function call. So this is a screenshot from Vapi, and this is what the function looks like. So what we're able to do is assign a name of a function, describe its purpose, and then add a set of properties. So these functions contain properties which are just different bits of information that we actually want to send within our function call. So for example, if we wanted to book an appointment, we would need to actually store that person's name, booking day, booking time, etc. So we can do that using properties. So we would create a property called booking time. We would create a property called booking day, and then we would create a property called name. And so we can store all of that information into the function call that will occur. So we use a platform called make.com to actually run the automation from Vapi to the application we want to send or retrieve data from. So if we wanted to send information to a CRM system, we would make the request to make.com. That would then send the information to our CRM system. So if you are familiar with Zapier at all, Make is just a very similar platform. It enables us to communicate data between different applications quite easily. Let me know if you would like to see a more extensive, maybe 1 hour plus voice caller build video in the comments below. So these functions do require further prompting elements. So if we want to send an SMS to the actual caller, we need to actually prompt this action based on the function name set in Vapi. So for example, if we created a function for sending SMSs and we call it the SMS function, we could essentially just say run this SMS function when the user requests to receive our quote. So if we're building some sort of quote assistant, we could create a function that sends somebody a quote based on the conversation they just had, and that happens through a function called SMS. So the functions within Vapi are quite smart, and they can automatically detect which information is required to actually run the function. So in this case, it could look through the conversation that just occurred, find some elements that's required to put together a quote and send it to them via an SMS. Assuming that we've got all of the properties set up to capture all that data, we can send all of that data off to something like Twilio on make.com. Twilio is just like an SMS platform, and then we can have an SMS sent to a user live during our phone call or conversation. So jumping into some of the voice configurations, emotion prompting is where we sort of highlight the importance of certain prompt elements. So like I mentioned in the specifics part of my prompt, I said this is very important to my career. Now the reason we put that in there is to once again just highlight more importance to what we said. So for the specifics, I said that I wanted to follow a sales script. And in this case, that is one of the most critical parts of the sort of sales assistant we're building. So that's why I said this part specifically is very important to my career. And it's obviously just trained to know that something that's important to your career is probably something that it should stick to and make sure it does properly. And so that's just how the AI is trained. And by putting it in there, it is actually proven to output better results. So as you can see with the article on the right here, emotionally worded prompts can actually get generative AI to generate better answers. Another example of this could be, are you sure that that's your final answer? It might be worth taking another look. So once again, it's just a very strict prompt that's saying, make sure you're doing it properly. This is important because of this. And then these bits of sentences stacked up to target maybe following a sales script is something that can actually really work to get it to output consistently. Another key part of the voice configuration is 11 Labs. So 11 Labs is a realistic voice provider platform. So we will connect with 11 Labs to get access to sort of realistic sounding voices to speak our AI generated responses. 11 Labs also has a public voice library with many different accents and personalities. 11 Labs also allows you to clone your own voice, something that I've done, and you can also integrate this directly into your Vapi assistant as well if you'd like. They've also got documentation on sort of different text elements that affect how the output sounds. So this is something that we need to include into our voice caller prompts. So for example, adding in sort of 2 dashes at a time will create brief pauses. And you can also do sort of singular dashes. So it dash is dash getting late. So you can really break up sentences using the dashes in 11 Labs. Or you can use an ellipsis like yeah, I guess so. So you can just break up sentences using different characters. So you can just break up sentences using different characters based on the processing that 11 Labs does. Now for the voice realism, usually people will sort of stutter words and have pauses such as So in prompting, we can actually use a variety of combinations to get this effect. It could be spelled like UHM, or R. So we can actually get all these different ranges of sort of breaks and silences or pauses during the conversation through this. And so 11 Labs can actually process these and output some pretty natural sounds. Now, once again, these 11 Labs configurations need to be prompted to be outputted. So in our notes section, we could say, please output a series of dashes when you believe a pause is required. Now, the way that Vapi and 11 Labs sort of talk to each other is that Vapi does all of the AI generation in all of the text and the actual response that it's going to say. And then it sends that off to 11 Labs to process and turn into a voice. That is sent back to Vapi and then communicated to the caller. Now, the key thing there is that Vapi does the text processing and sends it to 11 Labs. So if you tell the prompt to include the dashes, it's likely that Vapi might not actually generate these dashes. So then when the response comes back from 11 Labs, it might not do the pauses or say stuff exactly how we wanted it to, because 11 Labs actually changed it when we got the information back. So this is once again another reason as to why testing is really important. And we just need to continuously add conditions to ensure that we can actually consistently and reliably output the pauses and breaks throughout the conversation to make it seem really seamless. So in terms of what actually defines a sort of successful prompt or successful voice assistant, we tell our clients that the outcome of these voice systems really ranges from 60 to 95%. Now, this means that the probability of consistently following a script or outputting similar dialogue, depending on how extensive our testing and adjusting is, will range from either 60% similar or 95% similar. Now, we do aim to reach that 90% mark for all of our clients. However, we do offer extensive testing and measuring periods to actually verifiably say that the system meets those expectations. So I hope that was a helpful video in understanding how to prompt AI voice callers, and that you now have a better understanding of the different elements that are required to build a sophisticated AI voice assistant. If you are a business owner and you're interested in an AI voice system, go ahead and book a call with my team below and we can discuss the project that you have in mind. We've also got an alternative consultation call where we actually find out how this AI voice system can be implemented into your business. If you did want to get access to 20 plus chatbot and automation templates, as well as an invite to our school community, just sign up for our free resource hub in the description. I'd greatly appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe to the channel, as I've got a lot more content around AI voice callers lined up. So the first part of my prompt here is a role, and a role defines who they are. So this is for the bot, who the bot is. So I've said you are an experienced travel assistant salesperson. Your role is to ask customers if they want to purchase lifetime travel insurance. So I've just made up a random thing, lifetime travel insurance. Obviously this could really sell anything you want, but this is just insurance. It's selling insurance, and that's its goal. That's who it is. The key thing here is that the bot should now know that this is its job. It is an experienced travel insurance salesperson, and it needs to strictly follow the script that's provided. The reason that we do this is that the bot now knows exactly what it is. It knows that it's an experienced travel insurance salesperson and that it shouldn't go off on a tangent talking about some random things, because it knows that its goal is to be a salesperson and to ask customers if they want to purchase our services. The next heading I've got here in my prompt is what they do, or the task. So your task is to converse with the customer using the provided script and determine if they would be interested in purchasing our services. So once again, it's really just being strict on what your job is as an assistant. So by saying your task is to converse with the customer and ask them if they're interested in our services, it knows it has one task, and that task is to ask them if they're interested and capture that question. This way, once again, it's not just going to go off on a tangent and start asking them questions about insurance that it's not relevant, because we simply want to know whether or not they're interested or they're not interested to qualify that lead. The next section I have here is specifics, and specifics are how it actually achieves that task. So I've gone ahead and said, you are a high converting salesperson who must closely follow the provided script. You are capable of answering any question the customer provides. However, you are an expert at flowing the conversation back into the script and asking the qualifying questions within the sales script. So this is really just going to more detail as to how you're going to go ahead and achieve that task, which is ensuring that if a question comes through that's not relevant to the script, still try and answer that question so that it doesn't seem like you're a robot, but then flow back into the script. So if they ask a completely random question, answer that question as best as you can, and then go back into the script, which is then asking them whether or not they're interested in our services. The next part says, these specifics are very important to my career. Please follow these. Your ability to accurately follow each part of the script whilst ensuring that each of the customer's questions are answered is greatly appreciated. So if you've followed prompt engineering at all, you'll know that sort of hyping up the chatbot and really appreciating the chatbot's answers and putting that in your prompt is actually a really good way to get accurate results out, as well as stating the importance of what they're doing by saying this is very important to my career. Really just emphasizes more importance on this element and this section of the prompt so that it focuses in on what you've actually said and tries to follow this as best as it possibly can. The next part that I've included is context, and this is sort of context around the business. Now you'll notice that I've got this sort of hashtag here and then two hashtags here. And so this is called markdown formatting. Now markdown formatting is just a way that we can structure our sort of prompt here to better help the AI understand which is part of which. So I've got context, and I've got context within the business, and then we've got context in what we do. And so I've structured these with two hashtags, and I've structured this with one hashtag. And so this markdown formatting is something that OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, actually endorses being used within prompts, as that's what it's actually trained with. So once you've got this sort of structure here, I've said our company, Travel Saver, provides customers with access to a one-time cost for lifetime travel insurance. So once again, this is really just reiterating to the AI that this is our services. We are a business that sells services, and you should stay in line with this, and that you shouldn't go off on a tangent and start talking about random stuff when we have one goal in mind, and that is to qualify customers for our one-time travel insurance. Next to this, I've got what we do, which is we call hundreds of people per day, and your role is to talk with these leads and accurately qualify the ones who are interested in our services. So now it really knows exactly what the business is, exactly what they do, and knows exactly what its role is. Now below this, I've got examples, and these examples is essentially just the scripts that I want the bot to follow with. So I would say this is probably the most important part of the script, because this is exactly what it's going to be following and what I've sort of set up to actually start following throughout all of these other bits of the prompt. I'm saying follow the script, follow the script. And so this is the script that I want it to strictly stick by to ask a certain amount of questions to then get this information back for the business to use. So in this case, I've got two scripts. I've got an interested example script. I've also got a not interested example script. And so the two scripts are, if they're not interested, we're going to say something different to whether or not they actually say that they're interested. So the way that I've structured this script is by saying you, and so you is the actual assistant that we're talking with, and we're just telling it what to say. So you should say, hi, is this Brendan? And then Brendan, if he says yes, you should then go say, hi, my name is John. I'm from a company called Travel Saver. And then we've got this prompt to just say, sorry for the random call. How often do you travel per year? And we're just capturing some data back, and that's how we're structuring it. So one thing you might notice is that I've got sorry for and then it repeats the sentence, sorry for the super random call. And the reason I've done this is to make it sound a little bit more natural sounding, that the person isn't just speaking perfectly all the time and they're not stuffing up on anything that they're saying. We've actually just put that in there to make it a bit more human-like, and it's something that I recommend to put in as sort of like a sentence break and to really pause and to make it sound a little bit more realistic during the conversation. You'll also notice here that when I ask this question, how often do you travel per year? and then somebody responds, I travel to Tokyo twice a year for a holiday, we're then running a function. So the purpose of this question is to capture how many times the potential client travels per year, and this is going to gauge which clients and which leads are most qualified for our services. So if somebody travels 50 times a year, they're going to be a lot more qualified for our services, which is selling travel insurance, compared to somebody that doesn't travel at all. So right after this, I've got a function that says now run the travel frequency function with the result. So I'm going to go back to functions now, and we're going to have a look at the travel frequency function. So what I did on Vapi is I went and created a new function, and this function I simply just named travel frequency, and I just typed in the description, this is how frequent the user travels. Then below this, I've got our property, and the property is the exact bit of data that we're going to be sending into our sort of lead software or Google Sheets or whatever we're using to store all this data. We're then going to be capturing that exact amount of times they travel per year in a number, and then we're sending that off to make.com. So I've just said here per year because we want to capture how many times they travel per year. And I've just said this is how frequently they travel per year. And I've gone ahead and selected number because it's going to be a number that we're capturing. Then once we've ran that function, we'll continue on by saying that's awesome. We've got a new service that provides travel insurance for a one-time fee. Is this something that you'd be interested in? How much is it? We go down until asking them if they want to be on our waitlist for it. And then we've got another function that just says interest level. And interest level is just another function we've set up to capture whether or not they're interested. And this is either yes or no. They're either interested or they're not. And so we've just captured in here. This function will store if the user is interested in our services. We've got a property that says yes or no, either yes or no if the user is interested in our services. And I've selected a Boolean, and so this is a true or false. That's what that means. And so this is capturing either true or false from the user. And then we're going to go ahead and then send that data obviously back into our lead software. And then once that's complete, the script is completely done, and we've captured all the data that we're looking for, and the call is now finished. And then conversely, if they were not interested and we ask them how often they travel, maybe we can capture that data, but if we don't, then it won't capture anything obviously. But if we continue on, we can ask them if they're interested at all. And if they say no, it will just say no worries, have a nice day. And then obviously it's then going to record the function result as being not interested. And just lastly for the prompting, we've got notes, and notes are just sort of conditions that we want to throw in just to fix little errors here and there. So just saying, please ensure you follow the script closely. So making sure that it actually follows the script exactly, that's what we want. Then if a customer asks a question deviating from the script, still answer that question accurately. Don't just continue the script like a robot. Then I've got some critical notes, which are a bit stricter than the other notes. And I'm just saying you must keep the within the script. This is used for creating realistic pauses and assists in your ability to convince people to purchase our services. So just adding in this extra conditioning to make sure it actually says or keeps the during the prompt, as I found sometimes it would just leave it out. So it's really quite a lot of trial and error. And this is what's required to actually get that really perfect prompt, is that you've just got to continuously test this and call it a million times, and then just change this prompt over and over again to really just hone in on really getting an accurate and realistic sounding voice assistant. If you did want to get access to this entire prompt, I'm going to have it within my free resource hub link in the description, which has also got 20 other chatbot and automation templates that you can get as well. So moving on to make.com, Make is an automations platform that allows us to send data from different applications. And in this case, send data from Vapi on our caller and send some data directly into Google Sheets. And so in this instance, we've gone ahead and created a make.com scenario that uses a webhook. A webhook is sort of this sort of public URL that we can send information to, and we can use it to detect that we've got a request here on Make. So if I go back to Vapi, we've got our interest level, and what it allows us to do is put in a server URL, which is a webhook URL. If I go into my webhook here on make.com, if we create a webhook, we can just create this sort of URL here, click copy address to clipboard, go back to Vapi and just paste it in here. And now when we make a request with this interest level, when the prompt finds that it needs to run this, it will then trigger this automation, sending the data through make.com and then recording the data in Google Sheets. So this is what my Google Sheet looks like. It essentially has a number for the phone number of the user we're calling. It's got a name, it's got an interest level that's been recorded through Vapi, travel frequency, which has been recorded through Vapi, as well as the assistant ID. So the number and name is information that you've got to go ahead and upload yourself into the system, as this is then going to obviously call all of the leads that you upload into this Google Sheet here. So obviously you don't have to use Google Sheets. You can use Airtable, you can use Go High Level, you can use any CRM system that you have. But obviously just for this demo, I have configured it in Google Sheets, but ultimately you would just swap this out for being whatever provider you have. It's quite simple to set up. It's a drag and drop no code platform where essentially you can just click on add, find any platform that you have, drag it in here, and then simply just add some data into a Google Sheet row, select your exact spreadsheet, take the data from Vapi, place it in there, and you're good to go. So more specifically, what this does is that this first Google Sheets block searches rows. And the reason it's searching for rows is it's trying to find the number that has just been called and the information of where to actually put it. So we've got here number, so it's looking at the number column within our spreadsheet. It's going ahead and looking through the numbers. Obviously, I've only got just me in here at the moment, but if you went ahead and had thousands of leads in here, it would then find the number that you were looking for. So number, if it's equal to the number that has just called us or sent the data from Vapi, grab that row and then go ahead and send data into that row. So this next block is update a row. And then what we're doing is just grabbing the row number that we've found to be relevant to the caller. And then all we're doing is inputting the interest level, travel frequency, and assistant ID that comes from Vapi. So if we've made the call and it's gone ahead and had an interest level, it's had a travel frequency, we're going to see these functions come through from Vapi. So when we go to functions, interest level, we can see here, I've got my property that says yes, no. And if I just go back to make.com, we can see here, yes, no. So that is the parameter that the bit of data is going to be stored in. And if I go back to Vapi and have a look at the travel frequency per year, so that's the per year is what's being stored with the amount of times they travel per year. And if I go back here, per year. So this is information that comes through the webhook from Vapi and we can send directly into our Google Sheet and add the corresponding values for each lead in Google Sheets. Now the next make automation here is going to be the most important part of this entire system, which goes ahead and looks through all of our leads that are going to be in our Google Sheet, whatever platform CRM that we're using. It's going to go ahead and look through all of these leads, and then it's going to go and iterate through each of them, and it's going to call each of them using 2 different assistants. Now the reason that I'm randomly calling on 2 different assistants is that I'm actually going to be tracking which assistant is making which call using the assistant ID. And the reason that I'm doing this is to set 2 different sales scripts per assistant. And we're going to run this randomly, sort of 50-50 split test between the 2 different assistant sales scripts. And this data is going to be recorded in our spreadsheet. And we're going to be able to understand which sales script is more effective in converting each of these leads into sales for the business. So the first module that I'm using here is the Google Sheets search rows. And it does exactly what it says. It just searches through all of the rows within a Google Sheet and it pulls back the data. At the moment, I've got it set to 100 at max, but we could increase this as many as we like. But ultimately, it will just pull through a certain amount of leads from our lead list, and then it's going to go ahead and then pull through and run each row at a time. The next module I have here is an array aggregator. Now, the purpose of an array aggregator is to essentially help in iterating through each row. So rather than pulling back all of these rows in one big chunk, we want to take that big chunk and then turn it into one run at a time. So we can actually run each call separately and individually to each lead. So all we need to do is add this array aggregator, just select the values that we want. So we want the row number, name, interest level, and that's all the values that we want. Clicking OK, and then adding in an iterator function on make. Now the purpose of this iterator is then to iterate through one by one everything in this array. So by just putting in an iterator module and then clicking on the array right here, array, if we hover over it, we can see that's an array. Putting that in here, it's then going to iterate through each row of our spreadsheet into our Vapi calls. Moving on to the next module, we've got a router, and a router routes down 2 different paths depending on some set of conditions. So I've just added in another module here, but I'll get back to that in just a second. So right after our router, the purpose of this router is to go down a different path based on a set condition. And so in this little sort of line here, and we click on this, we can actually set a condition. And if this condition is met, it will go down this path. So in this case, I've said if this random number that I've generated in the tool, but I'll just come back to that, is less than 0.5, it should run. And in this case, I've said if this random number is greater than 0.5, it should run. And so the purpose of this tools function is to create a variable called random number and assign random, which is a variable that is stored within make.com. So if we just click on the text here and type in random, we can get this variable called random, which is a floating point, which is a random number between 0 and 1. So this is just going to be a random number that could be between 0 all the way up until 1. And so what I've gone ahead and said is if it's between 0 and 0.5, or it's between 0.5 and 1, they are the 2 different areas that we're going to run down. This way we can split our voice assistants into 50-50 by essentially randomly setting a variable and then going down a different condition based on the variable that has been set. So depending on whichever one it actually goes ahead and runs, it's then going to run a HTTP request. And so what this module is doing is making the Vapi phone call through an API request. We can actually request to Vapi to make a call to a particular phone number using all the prompts and using all the functions that we have set up on Vapi, we can make a call through make.com to actually initiate a call to a particular phone number that we choose. So if you did want to go ahead and copy this make automation as well as my other make automation and the prompt as well, you can go ahead and sign up for my free Resource Hub link in the description, where you can get access to all of this for completely free. So to make this request, I've gone ahead and put in the Vapi phone call URL, which is https://api.vapi.ai/call/phone. So this is something that you can find within the Vapi API documentation. You can find a whole heap on how to make requests to Vapi, but ultimately you can go ahead and actually just copy this from my resource hub and then just use that from here. But essentially how this works is that we make the request to Vapi. We're doing a post request because we're going to be sending data off to Vapi to make our call for us. We're just posting that data off using a post. So just below this, we've got our authorization, and this authorization is just an API key to authenticate that we're allowed to be making these calls. So just going back to Vapi, we can get this key by going down to our account and then just clicking on API key and just hitting the copy button, taking that back, typing bearer, and then just hitting space and then pasting our key in here. And then we should be authenticated to make these requests. Then below this, we've got our content type application/JSON. So just typing that in as a header and that in as the value. Then below this, we've got our actual JSON request. So we're actually going ahead and typing in all of the values similar to how it looked on the Vapi user interface, but we're just going ahead and typing this manually using some JSON. So it's just doing all of the same stuff with our function here. We've got our function with the yes/no property description. It's if the user is interested in our services, type Boolean. So this is just structured, and I've copy and pasted this from the Vapi documentation. So you can go ahead and just copy this as well and paste it and configure it to be exactly how you want it to be. But scrolling down further, we've got our content as well, which is content is our instructions. And I've gone ahead and just copy pasted my entire prompt into this. And it's going to go ahead and just use this exactly how it has on the user interface, but we're just making this request through make.com, obviously. Now, one thing that we can do now as well is obviously use the dynamic names from our lead list here to actually say, hey, is this Brendan? Or hey, is this John? Whoever the actual lead is. We've gone ahead and put first message, hey, is this name? And this name has come from this iterator, which has ultimately come from Google Sheets. So it now knows that this particular call, by just going to the iterator here and just selecting name, which the value here in this test was Brendan, it knows the exact name of the user that we're calling, and it's just going to say what their name is, and it's going to actually know a bit about that person. So scrolling down a bit further, we've got the customer information, which is a name and number, which allows us to put in, just putting in the name from the Excel sheet as well as the number, because obviously it needs to know which number to actually go ahead and call. So once again, you can go ahead and just copy this entire JSON script from my free resource hub and just configure it to however you'd like, and just putting in all those values. Simply just read some of the headings that are here and just fill in the blanks with everything you need. You can see here, I've got my function with the server URL, which is the make.com webhook to my spreadsheet data. So it's all very similar to how it was done on the Vapi interface. So what I've gone ahead and done on the Vapi interface here is I've gone and clicked this button to duplicate my voice assistant. And now I've got a second voice caller here that I'm going to take the assistant ID here and just update this one up here. And so now this assistant here is going to be a different assistant that makes these calls, so that when we track this data in the spreadsheet, we're actually going to get two completely different assistant IDs. So we can track which caller is making which calls and what the conversion rates of each caller are. So I've just gone ahead and added in some fake data here to demonstrate exactly what this would look like if we were to actually scale this system to a bunch of phone numbers and then just call up a bunch of people and then get some data back from these people. So in this instance, we've captured the travel frequency as well as the assistant ID, as well as the interest level of that particular lead. So in this case, for travel insurance, what they're looking for are people that are actually interested in their services, of course. We're also looking at the travel frequency and finding who has the highest amount of travel frequency, and then going ahead and actually selling the services to those people because they are the most qualified for their services. And so obviously being able to capture that data at scale to thousands and thousands of people quite quickly and capturing all of this data really gives great insights to that travel insurance place, because now they know that they've got a certain amount of leads that travel an incredible amount of time, and they can sell their services to them quite easily. So something that we can now do with this data is actually graph this data so we can actually visually see which assistant performed better than the other, and then choose that assistant to be the one that we actually want to run and scale on from here. So I've just gone ahead and filtered all of the interest levels to find all of the ones that were true. So I'm just going to select this column here, go to insert, chart, and then what I can get is a pie chart right here. So this graph shows that of all the people that converted on our calls, 52% came from this caller, and only 47% came from this caller. So by understanding this information, we're able to now pinpoint the exact sales script that is best working for our outbound caller. So in this case, we would go ahead and choose the blue one, which is the F6 assistant. So if we make to Vapi, I could see here that this one is the F6 assistant. And so you would obviously just go ahead and choose this one as being the sales script that works the best for our leads. So this whole optimization service here is an incredibly valuable service that you could offer to businesses to go ahead and actually optimize with not just 2 sales scripts, but you could do 5 or 10 different sales scripts that you craft and really pinpoint the exact sales scripts and areas of the script that need to be improved to create the best sales caller that gets the most conversions possible for the business. Once again, if you want to get access to all of the Make templates and prompts used in this video, you can go ahead and sign up for my free Resource Hub link in the description. I've also got 20 other chatbot and automation templates included in my Resource Hub that you can go ahead and download for completely free. So to get started, I'm going to work on the inbound diversion system. So once again, the purpose of this assistant is to divert the caller to the right department. So if I had a particular problem with a product that I just bought and I called up this number and said that the product was broken, it might divert me to the technical team to go ahead and fix the product. But if I went ahead and called them and asked that I would like to purchase one of their products, it may go ahead and divert me to the sales department. So to give you an even better idea, I'm just going to show you the demo of the system working.
Hi, thank you for calling Apple. Please let me know what you are looking for, and I will forward this call to the corresponding department.
Hey, I'm looking to buy the iPad 5.
Great. We'd be more than happy to assist you with your purchase. Can I please have your name?
John.
Thank you, John. I am now forwarding your call to our sales team, who will assist you further with purchasing the iPad 5.
Hi, is this John?
Yeah, this is John.
Hi, John. It looks like you were interested in an iPad 5, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So as you can see there, we were able to call up this assistant, give it our particular problem. It identified that we were looking for a sales department, and then it went ahead and called us from the sales department. We can pick up and then start talking with the sales guys. So in this case, I'm forwarding the calls to another AI. So we have a sort of multi-AI agent system going on. But obviously you can also just forward the call to an actual number if you don't want that sort of secondary AI step. But jumping right into it, I'm just going to briefly go over Vapi, which Vapi is the AI caller platform that allows us to build most of this system. So right here on Vapi, we have a set of instructions that teaches the AI on how to respond. Then we've got a voice tab, which I've got selected at 11 Labs. So if you're familiar with any of the AI voice stuff, 11 Labs is one of the most advanced platforms that allows us to create really realistic sounding voices. But obviously you can choose whichever platform you'd like, but I've gone ahead and selected 11 Labs and added a custom voice. And next to this, we have functions, and functions are what are going to allow us to make these transferring calls. I'll come back to these functions in just a minute, and now I'm just going to explain to you how I've engineered the prompt for this particular assistant. So here on Vapi, we get 2 sort of boxes in our sort of instruction settings. One is a first message, and the first message is simply the first thing that the assistant says when you call it. So in this case, I've said, "Hi, thank you for calling Apple. Please let me know what you're looking for, and I'll forward this call to the corresponding department." So for this particular example, I've just chosen Apple, but obviously you can choose whatever you'd like or integrate it into your own business. Then below this first message, we have a system prompt, and a system prompt is more of the heavy instructions that actually teaches the assistant how to respond, how to act, and really let it know who it is. So the first thing in my system prompt, I'm stating the role, and the role is who the assistant is, so who they are. And in this case, I've said you are an experienced help desk assistant for the technology company Apple. Your role is to divert calls to the relevant departments depending on the customer's query. So by just going ahead and stating directly to the assistant who they are and exactly what their role is, it's going to now understand how to tackle all the questions that come its way. Scrolling down a bit more, I have a specific task. So the task is what they actually have to do. So what does the assistant actually have to do to achieve their role, which is ultimately diverting calls to the relevant departments. And in this case, the task is to converse with the customer. You need to find out which of these departments best suits their needs. And in this case, I've said a technical department, sales department, or disputes department. If you are looking for a custom system just like this, you can go ahead and book a call with my team using the calendar link in the description. We've helped several businesses integrate the solutions that you've seen here on the channel, and we'd be more than happy to help you out. And then I have specifics. So this is actually how they do it. So how do they actually achieve this task that we've set out? And this is just saying you are a highly intelligent classifier. You'll be able to tell if a particular customer needs the technical team for product support, the sales team to purchase a product, or the dispute team to return the item, receive a refund, etc. You must closely follow the scripts provided for each department. And these specifics are very important to my career. Please follow these. Your ability to accurately classify the right department deeply helps the business make a profit. So you're probably wondering why I added this in here. And the only reason I've added this in here is to do with something called emotional prompting. And emotional prompting really just helps emphasize the importance of this part of the prompt by saying that it's very important to my career and that it's critical for the business's profit. The prompting and the agent will just look at this and give it a bit of a higher ranking in terms of its importance, and then really try to focus in on and really work with what you've said. Now, just beneath this, I've got context, and context is actually just giving the AI a bit more context as to who they actually are. And so in this case, I've given context to the business and what we actually do. Now you'll notice that I've got this sort of hashtag here and this double hashtag here as well. And the reason I've done this is called markdown formatting. And markdown formatting is really just communicating to the AI different sections and importance levels during the prompt. And so this is something that OpenAI themselves actually trained their models on. So this is just a really good thing to get into, where we're adding in these subsections, which really just communicates to the AI what is part of what, and really just helps give it even more context as to the prompt we've given it. So in this case, we've got context, which is the main heading, and then we've got the business, which is the sort of subheading. And within this, we've got We Are Apple Inc., and we provide technology products to the world, for example, the iPhone and iPad. Now, obviously, for your actual business, you might need to provide a little bit more detail, but in this case, I'm sort of just betting on the fact that it knows what Apple is through its basic training data. Then below this, we've got what we do, and so this is once again double hashtagged, and we're just saying we help people connect digitally with world-class devices. I've just made that up, but obviously you can add whatever you want for your particular business, and this is really just going to help it get an understanding of who they are, what their purpose is, and why they're doing what they're doing, and really emphasizing the importance on what they're doing as well. Then below this, we have one of the most important parts of the actual prompt, which is examples. And so we need to provide examples to the bot so it actually understands what it needs to do, and it doesn't just ramble on some random thing that isn't relevant to what we're trying to do. So once again, I've got our main heading of examples, and I've got the subheading that says sales department script. And so I've got several different scripts for each of the different versions or variants of conversations that could occur. So in this case, I've got a sales department script. Below this, I've got a sales department script version 2. So if something different happens, I've just gone ahead and given it some sort of instructions and a pathway to take if something else happens. Below this, I've got a technical department script as well as a dispute department script as well. So the way that I've structured the sales department script, I've just said you, and so you is the assistant because we're talking to the assistant here. I've said you should say, hi, thank you for calling Apple. So this is really just the first message. So we're just emphasizing the first message that it just said so it stays on track. And then we're saying, if the customer says, hi, I'm interested in purchasing an iPhone 15, we should then say, great, we'd be more than happy to assist you in this. Can I please have your name? And then I will forward this call to our sales team. So for this particular assistant, I'm looking for two different values. I'm looking for the product that they're interested in purchasing, so the iPhone 15, and I'm also looking for their name. And so you'll notice just below this, I've got a function call, and the function call, it says, once the customer name and product name is collected, run the sales function. So now I'm gonna go back to functions. If I just click on functions, and then we've got our sales function. When something specific occurs during the conversation, we can have a particular action run. And in this case, I've gone ahead and said, when the call needs to be forwarded to the sales team, run the sales function. So the prompt we gave it will understand this, and during the call automatically start to run this function because it's now met that criteria. Now below this, we have two different properties. One is name and one is product. And so like we said during that prompt, we've got the name, so that's the name of the customer. And we've also got the name of the product. So once it's got these required values, it's gonna go ahead and send a request to make.com. So this right here is make.com. Make.com is an automations platform that allows us to communicate information from one platform to the other. And so in this case, we're able to take Vapi and send a request to a sort of URL. This URL is then able to send a bit of information over to a request block. And then this request block can then send some more information off to Vapi, which is another phone call, which is going to call our customer or our person on the phone. And that is going to be the sales department now talking to them. So very simply, all I've done is created a new make scenario. I've added in this webhook block, and this webhook block has given me a URL. I've gone ahead and copied this URL, added it to our server URL function. And then all this does is it then runs off to a HTTP request. And so this request block simply makes a phone call from your Vapi account and goes ahead and just calls the number that came through on the webhook. And so if I just scroll down a bit in this request block, we've got a bit of JSON here, which just is structuring the exact assistant that we're going to be calling with. So this JSON here you can get from the Vapi documentation, which I will have linked in the description, but I'm also going to have this template within my free resource hub linked in the description. My resource hub also has 20 other chatbot and automation templates, which you can use and play around with for completely free. So very similar to what we had just before. We've got the role and we've got who they are and we've got the specifics, and it's really just the exact same script. And then I've also gone ahead and added in some dynamic variables that came in from the webhook. So what we're able to do is by making this call via a request, we're able to input their name as well as the product that they were interested in and actually communicate this back to them. So if in the first call they said that their name was Brendan and they were interested in the iPhone 15, that call that gets then sent to them is going to say, hey, are you Brendan and are you interested in the iPhone 15? So all we need to do is then send a request to make.com to get these variables populated in Make. And then we can simply find these variables in here, and you can see here parameters, name and product. So this has come directly from Vapi in those parameters, and it just says name. So we just click on name. In this case, an example that I sent through was named John. So we can just put hi, and then in the actual call, it will say, hi John, are you interested in the iPhone 15? The Vapi request will also give us the phone number, and this is all information coming from the webhook. So make sure to just run this once to get all that information through, and then you can just populate all these fields with the corresponding values. I've also created another variation of the sales department script, which if they just go ahead and say, I'm interested in buying something, we need to then offer some of the products we offer. So I've just said, great, are you looking for an iPhone, iPad, or laptop? And if they say they're looking for an iPad, then great, we've captured that information. But if they haven't said their name, we'll just ask them for their name, and then we'll forward that call and then make this request with the function call, sending all this data off to Make to then send them that new call with the sales call populated with all their new values. Now, just below this, we've also got the technical department script as well as the dispute department script, which are once again very similar, just being relevant to their actual departments. So in this case, it's saying, hi, thank you for calling Apple, like that first one. Hi, my iPad has stopped charging recently. I'm not sure what to do. It'll just say, we're sorry to hear about that. Could I get your name? And then we'll forward your call. And then once again, the dispute department, my Apple Watch was meant to be delivered. It's not here. Sorry to hear that. We'll then forward your call to our support department to get this sorted. So obviously these scripts are very short scripts, very simple to get set up, but just making sure they're relevant to the particular department and then going ahead and running the relevant function, and it'll work quite easily. So just for this video, I've only set up the sales department here, but obviously the technical department and dispute department will be exactly the same, just setting up the function, adding in the make.com URL, and then just setting up the automation to send a call, send a caller assistant that is actually relevant to them. Now, if I just scroll down a bit, you'll see a forwarding phone number option. And so Vapi actually has an integrated forwarding phone number system. And so simply put, all this allows us to do is just enter in our phone number and then in the prompt say forward the phone number if this occurs. And so obviously this is great and really simple to use rather than setting up our own make function, but we can only obviously set one of these at a time. So if we want to have multiple forwarding phone numbers, we do just need to set up a couple of make automations to make that happen. But if you are looking for a little bit of an easier way to just do one forwarding phone number, you can just type in that number. This is probably a better use case for more of a human handoff system, where if somebody says that they'd like to speak with a human, or it identifies that the customer seems a bit angry, we can go ahead and then trigger the forwarding call to a particular number. And in this case, have the human now start that conversation. Just quickly, if you want to see more AI voice caller videos just like this, let me know what you want to see in the comments below. So now jumping into the second inbound phone caller system, we've got a contact form where a customer or a lead can come through, type in their name, email address, phone number, as well as a message, and they're going to get called in 5 minutes from an AI phone caller, and it's going to help qualify them as a lead or even book an appointment if we want to. So this is going to be a super intelligent assistant that not only knows what its name is, but it's actually going to understand the message and the context of that message. So if I take the Apple sales caller, for example, if they typed they wanted an iPhone 15 in the message box, when they get called up, it's going to know obviously that they wanted to buy an iPhone 15 and really tailor that conversation to that. So for this particular example, I'm using Webflow for my form submission, but you could use any website provider or form provider that you use. And then all you got to do is swap out the make block that I'm using. I'm just using a Webflow block that watches for any form submissions. You would simply just swap that out for whatever provider you have and then continue on the automation, which would be exactly the same. So if you are following along with Webflow, all you need to do is just chuck in a form block, add in some values for a name, email address, phone number, and message. And then we're going to use these values when a make request is made. So jumping into make.com, right here, I've got a Webflow watch events, and this just watches for any form submissions that occur on the website. So in the case of my website, this form is called voice call. And so all I want to do is just ensure that we're getting the calls from the right form. So what I have is a filter on my make automation that just checks if the form is coming from the right one. I'm just saying if the name of the form is equal to voice call, which is my form name, then continue the automation. So once this automation has gone through, we've now populated all of the values from Webflow, and we're now moving on to a sleep tool. So in make.com, we're able to actually put in a sleep tool that simply just waits and delays the automation before continuing on to other steps. In this case, I've got it set to 15 seconds just for testing, but we could put this all the way up to 300 seconds, which is 5 minutes. And then that is going to give us enough time to make it sound a bit more realistic that the business has called them 5 minutes after they've gone ahead and submitted that contact form. So once the automation has waited for the sleep block, we're just moving on to another request block, which is exactly the same as the one before, where we're making the API call to Vapi to make a phone call and then send that phone call to the number that came through from the Webflow request. So all I've done is ran the Webflow request, and this has allowed me to populate a bunch of fields here. And so what I've done is populated the name and the message within this prompt. And so just within the specifics part of my prompt, you can see here specifics, I've added in another thing that says, please refer to the customer's message when starting the conversation. And then I've done message column, and then I've got the message that came directly from Webflow. And so by doing this, we're able to give it a little bit more context as to what the conversation should be about. If it's going to be a sales call, what are we actually selling? And if we already have that information, like the iPhone 15, obviously we want that information to be there in the conversation to give it a little bit more context about what we're doing. And so once that is set up, we're simply able to go ahead and just fill out this contact form, hit the submit button, and have the make automation run, sending a call to the particular phone number that was inputted in the form, calling us, and then qualifying us, whatever we like. If you are looking for a custom system just like this, you can go ahead and book a call with my team using the calendar link in the description. We've helped several businesses integrate the solutions that you've seen here on the channel, and we'd be more than happy to help you out. If you found the video helpful, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel, as well as comment below on anything else you'd like to see.